Imagine standing on a sun-warmed terrace of white marble, the stone still holding the gentle heat of a day that has just slipped past the horizon. Below, the Aegean Sea stretches out, a vast and quiet blanket of deep velvet indigo, barely stirring under the emerging silver light of a crescent moon. The air is thick with the scent of crushed thyme, wild oregano, and the subtle, sweet fragrance of pine needles baking in the fading twilight. There is no urgency here. The wind, softening as evening settles, rustles through the silvery leaves of an ancient olive tree, making a sound like distant, rhythmic breathing. You're standing at the edge of the ancient world, a place where time is not measured in minutes or hours, but in the slow passage of shadows and the steady turning of the stars. In this space, the noise of the modern day simply evaporates, leaving behind only the quiet echoes of a civilization that found profound beauty in the natural order of things. Your breathing slows to match the rhythm of the gentle waves lapping against the distant shore. This journey is designed to be a sanctuary for your resting mind. The ancient Greeks believed deeply in the concept of ataraxia, a state of serene calmness, untroubled by the worries of the outside world. That is what we are stepping into now. As we drift through the long, shadowed corridors of ancient Greece, you do not need to try to actively remember any of this. There will be no questions, no demands on your attention. Let your mind soften, like wax melting gently near a warm hearth. Allow these ideas, these quiet fragments of history, to drift through your awareness like leaves floating on a slow-moving stream. Some images may linger, painting themselves softly behind your closed eyes, while others will simply wash over you, carrying away tension and replacing it with calm. What stays, stays. What fades, fades. You're only a passenger on this quiet journey back through time, entirely safe, entirely at rest, as the ancient world reveals its quietest, most peaceful secrets. This profound appreciation for stillness was so deeply woven into their understanding of the world that they gave it a name we still use when we speak of perfect, undisturbed peace. They called them the Halcyon days. In the very heart of the Mediterranean winter, when the storms were expected to be at their most fierce, there would suddenly arrive a miraculous period of absolute calm. For 14 days in January, the winds would inexplicably die down. The turbulent sea would transform into a flat, glassy mirror, reflecting the pale winter sun in perfect stillness. The Greeks observed this profound quiet and believed it was a gift from the gods to the halcyon bird, a beautiful kingfisher. According to the ancient myth, the gods calmed the entire world so that this little bird could safely build her floating nest upon the sea and hatch her young. Even today, meteorologists recognize this actual weather phenomenon, a sustained high-pressure system that settles over the Aegean, bringing 2 weeks of bright, cloudless skies and hushed winds. It is a reminder that even in the midst of the darkest, most turbulent seasons, nature has built in pauses, moments of profound, unshakable calm. That same reverence for restorative quiet was the foundation of ancient Greek medicine. Far away from the bustling city centres, nestled deeply within fragrant whispering pine forests, stood the sanctuaries of Asclepius, the god of healing. The most famous of these retreats was at Epidaurus, a place chosen specifically for its pristine air, its pure, bubbling water springs, and its enveloping silence. Here, healing was not a matter of harsh treatments or stressful interventions. Instead, the ultimate cure was sleep. Patients seeking relief from ailments of the body or the exhausted mind would practice enkoimesis, or incubation sleep. After days of quiet meditation, gentle exercise, and bathing in warm, mineral-rich waters, the visitors would lie down to sleep in the abaton, a sacred open-air dormitory. In the cool night air, surrounded by the scent of earth and pine, they were encouraged to drift into a deep, peaceful slumber. The belief was that in the vulnerability and stillness of sleep, the mind would produce a dream, a gentle vision that held the key to their healing. This soft approach recognised a truth we're only now rediscovering, that profound, undisturbed rest is the body's most powerful natural medicine. The architecture of the sanctuary itself was designed to soothe the nervous system, with soft, curving lines and a harmonious integration with the surrounding forest, creating an atmosphere where the heavy burdens of the waking world could simply melt away into the earth. This desire for absolute harmony, a visual soothing of the mind, was woven into the very stone of their greatest architecture. If you were to walk up the ancient path to the Acropolis and stand before the Parthenon, you would feel an immediate, inexplicable sense of rightness, a calming balance that feels entirely natural. Yet, this feeling of perfect stability is an intricate, deliberate illusion. The master architects understood that human eyes naturally distort straight lines, making them appear to sag or lean over long distances. To counteract this visual tension, they designed the Parthenon with almost no perfectly straight lines or harsh right angles. Instead, the massive marble columns are carved with a gentle, almost imperceptible swelling in the middle, a technique called entasis. It is as if the stone itself is taking a slow, deep breath, expanding slightly under the weight of the roof. The floor of the temple bows upward in the centre by just a few inches, like the gentle curve of the earth itself, and the columns lean slightly inward. These microscopic adjustments, these soft organic curves, deceive the eye into seeing absolute geometric perfection. The building feels weightless, at rest, rooted to the earth yet softly reaching upward. It is a masterclass in softening rigidity, a reminder that true balance often requires a gentle yielding, a subtle flexibility that is far more beautiful than strict unbending lines. To look at those columns reaching toward the sky is to understand the Greek fascination with the heavens above, a fascination that led to the creation of something wonderfully complex, yet deeply calming in its precision. In the quiet depths of the sea, off the coast of a small island, Devers discovered a lump of encrusted bronze that had rested in the silent dark for 2,000 years. This was the Antikythera Mechanism, often called the world's first analog computer. Imagine a device the size of a wooden shoebox, containing dozens of meticulously hand-cut bronze gears, interlocking with a delicacy that rivaled the finest watches of the modern era. Turning a small hand crank on the side of the box would set this intricate bronze ballet into motion. The gears would slowly, smoothly rotate, calculating and displaying the phases of the moon, the movements of the planets, and the timing of eclipses, all with breathtaking accuracy. It even tracked the gentle 4-year cycle of the ancient Olympic Games. There is something profoundly soothing about the existence of such an object. It represents a universe that is not chaotic or random, but ordered, rhythmic, and predictable. The turning of its gears was a quiet reflection of the turning of the cosmos, a mechanical heartbeat tracking the slow, majestic dance of the celestial bodies. It whispers to us that the universe follows a gentle, grand design, moving in cycles that we can quietly observe and understand. The hands that built that mechanism were guided by the eyes of astronomers who spent their lives bathed in the soft light of the night sky. In a world without the artificial glare of modern cities, the ancient night was a canvas of overwhelming, brilliant clarity. The astronomer Hipparchus spent countless nights on the island of Rhodes, doing nothing but looking upward, standing in the cool darkness and watching the slow drift of the stars. He was a man of infinite patience. Over years of quiet observation, relying only on his naked eyes and simple measuring tools, he compiled the first comprehensive star catalogue in the Western world. He carefully mapped the positions and varying brightness of hundreds of stars. But his most beautiful discovery was the precession of the equinoxes. He realized, by comparing his nightly observations with records from centuries past, that the entire map of the stars was slowly, almost imperceptibly shifting. The Earth itself was wobbling on its axis, like a top spinning in slow motion, a cycle that takes 26,000 years to complete. To look up at the stars and recognize a movement so vast, so slow that it spans millennia, is to feel the soothing weight of deep time. It places our daily worries into a gentle perspective, reminding us that we are part of a vast, slow-moving system that operates on a scale of profound, quiet majesty. The harmony Hipparchus found in the shifting stars was the exact same harmony the Greeks sought in the world of sound. To them, the universe was not just a visual spectacle, it was a musical composition. The philosopher Pythagoras, sitting in quiet contemplation, made a discovery that forever linked the worlds of mathematics and music. He found that if you pluck a single string, it makes a specific note. If you divide that string exactly in half and pluck it again, it produces a sound that is perfectly harmonious with the first, what we now call an octave. Divide it further, and you create the foundation of all beautiful musical chords. This was a revelation of profound beauty. It meant that the pleasure we feel when we hear a soft melody, the way a quiet song can instantly calm a racing heart or ease a tense muscle, is not an accident. It is our bodies recognizing the fundamental mathematical truth of the universe. The Greeks called this the music of the spheres, the idea that the planets themselves hummed with these perfect mathematical ratios as they moved through the void. Whenever a musician in a quiet courtyard strummed the tortoiseshell sounding board of a lyre, releasing soft, resonant notes into the evening air, they were aligning themselves with the hidden, harmonious structure of nature itself. These harmonies, these philosophical discoveries, needed a place to rest, a way to survive the fleeting nature of spoken breath. In the grand city of Pergamum, nestled on a terraced hill overlooking a fertile valley, the pursuit of preserving knowledge led to a quiet revolution. Pergamum possessed a library so magnificent it drew scholars from across the sea. When political tensions caused a shortage of the Egyptian papyrus needed for writing, the scholars of Pergamum did not despair. Instead, they innovated. In their quiet workshops, they refined the process of treating animal skins until they were incredibly thin, smooth, and supple, creating a pristine writing surface that was far more durable than the brittle reeds of papyrus. They called it pergamenon, which eventually became the word parchment. The sensory experience of reading changed. Imagine the soft, satisfying rustle of turning a heavy parchment page, the subtle texture of the material under your fingertips, the smell of the ink settling into the natural grain. This material allowed books to be bound with pages that turned, giving birth to the shape of the book as we know it today. In the hushed halls of the library, surrounded by the quiet scratching of reed pens and the soft turning of pages, the thoughts of generations were being gently tucked away, preserved in a format that would peacefully carry human memory through the centuries. Outside those quiet libraries, the landscape itself held ancient living records of resilience and peace. Nothing symbolizes the serene endurance of the Greek world quite like the olive tree. These trees are masters of survival, thriving in poor, rocky soil, their roots sinking deep into the dry earth to find hidden moisture. The Greeks revered the olive tree as a sacred gift, an emblem of prosperity and calm. In the sun-drenched groves, the gnarled, twisting trunks of the olive trees stand like silent sentinels. Their wood is dense and incredibly hard, but their leaves are a study in softness. The top of an olive leaf is a muted, dusty green, while the underside is a shimmering, powdery silver. When a warm breeze sweeps through an olive grove, the leaves turn over in the wind, making the entire hillside look as though it is rippling with liquid silver. Some of these trees live for thousands of years. There are olive trees standing today, their trunks hollowed by time but their branches still bearing fruit that were silently growing when the philosophers were walking the streets of Athens. To rest beneath an olive tree is to sit in the shade of the living history. It is a slow-growing, quiet entity that asks for very little, providing a timeless, enduring symbol of peace. The slow, peaceful passage of time in that ancient world was not tracked by the harsh, ticking mechanisms we know today, but by the soft, steady flow of water. The Greeks used a device called a clepsydra, or water clock. Imagine a simple, elegant clay vessel filled with water with a tiny, precise hole at its base. The water would escape drop by drop, a gentle, rhythmic weeping into a lower bowl. Time was measured not by a rigid mechanism, but by the smooth, continuous movement of liquid. In the centre of Athens still stands the Tower of the Winds, a beautiful octagonal marble structure that served as an ancient timekeeping station. Inside this quiet, cool marble tower, a massive, elaborate water clock was fed by a stream flowing down from the Acropolis. As the water pooled and fell, it slowly turned mechanisms that displayed the quiet progression of the hours. On the outside of the tower, beautifully carved reliefs depict the gentle figures of the wind gods, floating gracefully through the air. To measure your day by the quiet dripping of a water clock is to understand time not as a diminishing resource to be hoarded, but as a flowing river, a continuous, peaceful stream that washes over the present moment and carries it gently into the past. And as that time flowed, it was captured and coloured by artists who sought to bring the vibrant, soothing hues of the natural world indoors. We often imagine the ancient Greek world as a landscape of stark, blindingly white marble. But this is a trick played by the passing centuries. In reality, their temples, their statues, and their homes were painted in vivid, joyful colours. Among the most prized of these was a specific shade of cerulean known as Egyptian blue, deeply embraced by Greek artisans. It is considered the world's first synthetic pigment. The creators would take silica, copper, and calcium, heating them in a kiln to a precise glowing temperature until they fused into a brilliant crystalline blue. The colour was identical to the deep twilight sky over the Mediterranean, or the darkest, most tranquil depths of the Aegean Sea. They ground this blue glass into a fine powder and used it to paint the backgrounds of their beautiful frescoes and the robes of their carved statues. Staring at this colour was meant to evoke the same feeling as gazing out over the open ocean on a still summer day, a feeling of vastness, of cooling relief, and of boundless serenity. Even now, microscopic traces of this gentle blue pigment remain hidden in the crevices of ancient stones, a quiet echo of a world that was painted in the calming colours of the sea and the sky, forever resting under the warm golden sun. That same tranquil sea, painted in shades of synthetic cerulean by human hands, held entirely different, organic spectrums hidden beneath its gently rolling waves. In the shallow, sun-warmed waters off the rocky coastlines of the Mediterranean, nature cultivated a colour so profound and difficult to obtain that it became the universal symbol of pure, untouchable serenity and immense reverence. This was Tyrian purple. Unlike the bright, cheerful blues of the frescoes, this dye was born from a slow, painstaking relationship with the ocean. Artisans would carefully gather specific, tiny murex sea snails, a process that required immense patience and a deep understanding of the coastal tides. It took thousands of these small shells, harvested by hand over weeks and months, to produce just a single, precious drop of the dye. The resulting liquid was not merely purple, it was a deeply saturated, velvety hue that seemed to shift in the light, carrying hints of dark crimson and the bruised indigo of a twilight sky. Because it was so rare, and its creation so delightfully slow, cloth dyed in this colour was reserved for the absolute highest echelons of society. To wear Tyrian purple was to wear the slow, accumulated time of the sea itself, a heavy, beautiful fabric that whispered of quiet shores and the deep, enduring rhythms of the natural world. From the sweeping, vast expanse of the ocean and its hidden colours, the Greek artisan possessed a remarkable ability to completely invert their perspective, narrowing their focus down to a space no larger than a human thumbprint. Consider the astonishing, quiet craft of the engraved seal stones. In an era long before magnifying glasses or electric light, master carvers would spend countless hours shaping tiny, smooth pieces of agate, carnelian, and quartz. With microscopic precision, They would incise unimaginably intricate scenes into the hard surface of the stone, a graceful deer resting in a forest, a ship with its sails unfurled, or a single, perfect olive branch. The level of detail achieved on such a minuscule canvas required a state of near trance from the artist. Their breathing had to be perfectly measured, their hands absolutely steady, their minds entirely cleared of any outside distraction. These beautiful little stones were worn on rings or simple cords around the wrist, functioning as personal signatures pressed into warm wax to seal a letter or a jar. To carry one of these stones was to carry a tiny, silent world, a masterpiece of focused stillness that could be held in the closed palm of a hand, a hidden anchor of artistry in a vast and shifting world. As you picture that tiny, perfectly carved scene, you might naturally notice your own focus softening. The muscles of your jaw can relax. Your shoulders may drop just a fraction of an inch, sinking deeper into the soft surface beneath you. Your breath settles into a slower, more deliberate rhythm, rising and falling without effort. For the ancient Greeks, this simple, involuntary act of breathing was far more than just a physical function. It was a profound connection to the universe itself. They called it pneuma. Pneuma was the word for breath, but it also meant spirit, and it meant the gentle wind that moved through the world. The philosophers believed that the universe was filled with this vital, invisible energy. When you took a slow, deep breath in the quiet of the night, you were not just pulling in air, you were drawing the very soul of the cosmos into your chest. The gentle breeze that rustled the leaves of an oak tree was made of the exact same substance that animated human thought and brought peace to a tired body. To breathe deeply was to harmonize your internal rhythm with the ancient, atmospheric tides of the earth, proving that we are never truly separate from the world around us, but always connected by the invisible, sustaining flow of air. That same vital wind would frequently sweep down from the rugged limestone mountains, carrying with it the dry, herbaceous scent of the late autumn harvest. This was the season of the olive, a time of slow, methodical, and deeply rewarding work. The process of transforming the bitter, freshly picked fruit into the golden oil that sustained an empire was a masterpiece of ancient pacing. Inside cool, shaded stone buildings, massive circular millstones, carved from rough volcanic rock, were slowly turned. The heavy stones would crush the olives with a satisfying rhythmic grinding sound, yielding a thick, fragrant paste. This paste was then spread onto woven mats, stacked high and gently, steadily pressed. The liquid that cascaded down the sides of the press was a thick, luminous green gold, shimmering in the dusty light of the mill. This was the lifeblood of antiquity. It was used to soothe dry skin, to flavour simple meals of bread and cheese, and most importantly, to push back the boundaries of the night. Poured into small, gracefully shaped terracotta lamps with a simple twisted linen wick, the oil burned with a steady, warm, smoky, sweet flame. The slow extraction of the oil mirrored the slow, comforting burn of the lamp, providing a soft, flickering glow that invited quiet conversation, deep reading, and eventually a peaceful surrender to sleep. The soft, flickering light of those small oil lamps often illuminated spaces of profound, almost impossible acoustic harmony. The ancient Greeks understood how sound moved through the air with the same intuitive genius they applied to carving marble. Imagine walking into the grand, open-air theatre of Epidaurus at dusk, just as the last spectators have drifted away, leaving the vast, semicircular bowl of stone entirely empty. You stand in the very centre of the circular stage, the orchestra floor, looking up at the 55 tiers of limestone seating curving beautifully up the hillside. The architecture here is not just visual, it is an instrument. If you were to strike a single match in the centre of that stage, or drop a small copper coin onto the stone floor, the sound would travel with absolute clarity to the very highest, farthest seat in the theatre, hundreds of feet away. This is not magic, but brilliant, quiet engineering. The specific cut of the limestone seats acts as an acoustic filter, perfectly absorbing the low-frequency hum of background murmurs and the rustling wind, while simultaneously amplifying high-frequency sounds, carrying them upward on a cushion of air. It is an environment built to honour the subtleties of sound, a place where a soft whisper can command the attention of thousands, reminding us that sometimes the most profound impact comes not from shouting, but from speaking softly in a space designed to listen. While the great echoing theatres amplified the human voice to reach the multitudes, there were other smaller sanctuaries designed exclusively to quiet the human mind and escape the noise of the crowd. Just outside the bustling stone-paved walls of ancient Athens, away from the loud, competitive debates of the central market, lay a secluded walled grove simply known as the Garden. This was the school of the philosopher Epicurus, and it was unlike any other academy in the ancient world. The Garden was not a place of intense high-stakes intellectual combat. Instead, it was a quiet retreat dedicated to the pursuit of ataraxia, that profound state of tranquility and freedom from mental distress. Epicurus taught that true happiness was not found in accumulating wealth, seeking fame, or worrying about the unpredictable whims of the gods. True joy was remarkably simple. It was found in the absence of pain, in a quiet afternoon spent in the shade of a pear tree, in a cup of cool water, a piece of fresh cheese, and the comforting low-stakes conversation of good friends. In this lush green sanctuary, students learned to cultivate a life of deliberate gentleness, proving that stepping away from the chaotic rush of society to simply exist in a quiet garden was not a retreat from life, but the deepest embrace of it. You too can step into your own quiet garden now. There is no need to hold tightly to any of these thoughts, nor to force your mind to follow every detail. Let the images pass like a cool evening breeze rustling through the leaves of those ancient fruit trees. The mind can simply drift. The body can simply rest. If your attention wanders, let it wander safely, guided only by soft, distant lights glowing in the dark. In the ancient world, the greatest and most comforting of these guiding lights was the pharaohs of Alexandria. Standing on a small limestone island at the edge of the Egyptian coast, this colossal lighthouse was one of the wonders of the world, built by Greek engineers to conquer the darkness of the sea. By day, a massive, brilliantly polished bronze mirror positioned at the very top of the tower would catch the blinding rays of the Mediterranean sun, reflecting a beam of light so intense it could be seen by ships drifting dozens of miles out in the open water. As night fell and the sky bruised into darkness, a great fire was kindled in front of the mirror. This steady, warm, pulsing beacon cut through the thickest sea fog and the blackest, moonless nights. For a weary sailor who had been navigating the unpredictable rolling waves of the deep ocean, the sight of that soft, glowing star on the horizon brought an immediate physical sense of relief. It was a promise of safety, a silent guardian standing at the edge of the world, softly calling the wanderers home to still waters. When those heavy wooden ships finally slipped into the calm, sheltered waters of the harbour, guided by that warm beam of light, they brought with them the quiet daily life of the ancient world. Deep in the holds of these ships sat hundreds of beautifully crafted earthen vessels, born of a magical collaboration between human hands, soft earth, and the transformative power of fire. The potters of ancient Greece, particularly in the region of Attica, possessed a deep tactile relationship with the ground beneath their feet. They harvested clay from the riverbanks, an earth naturally rich in iron. Imagine the cool, smooth, wet texture of this refined clay spinning steadily on a heavy wooden potter's wheel. Under the gentle, confident pressure of the artisan's wet thumbs and palms, a shapeless lump of mud would rise and expand, blooming outward into an elegant amphora or a wide, shallow drinking cup. But the true magic happened in the dark, intense heat of the kiln. Through a complex three-stage process of firing, controlling the flow of oxygen to the flames with absolute precision, the dull earth was transformed. The areas painted with a special refined slip turned a deep, glossy, permanent black, while the unpainted clay fired into a rich, warm, terracotta orange. This alchemy of the earth created vessels that were not only deeply beautiful but incredibly resilient, holding the cold water, the dark wine, and the golden oil that kept the ancient world flowing smoothly. These beautiful earthen jars physically held the bountiful harvest of the Mediterranean, but Greek thinkers were equally obsessed with a much larger concept, holding the shape and balance of the entire world in their minds. Long before humanity could launch vessels into the sky to look back at the earth, a philosopher named Anaximander stood on the shores of Ionia and achieved a breathtaking leap of imagination. He is credited with drawing the very first map of the known world, the Oikoumene. But more profoundly than just drawing coastlines, he theorized about the Earth's place in the vast, dark theatre of the cosmos. Anaximander envisioned the Earth not as a flat plate resting on the back of an animal, or floating in an infinite ocean of water, but as a solid object suspended entirely in empty space. He argued that the Earth remained perfectly still, floating in the centre of the universe, simply because it was equally distant from all other things. It had no reason to fall, no direction to drift, because it was held in a state of absolute elegant equilibrium. There is a profound, deeply settling comfort in this ancient cosmological vision. It suggests a universe governed not by chaotic, random forces, but by a quiet, invisible architecture of perfect balance, where everything has its natural, suspended place in the dark, supportive void. And as the Earth rested in that perfect, suspended equilibrium, the sky above it would undergo its daily, magnificent transition. The harsh, bright heat of the day would slowly burn off, and the white marble of the city temples would shift in tone, reflecting the dying sun in soft shades of rose, then pale lavender, and finally a deep, encompassing indigo. To the ancient Greeks, this arrival of the night was not a mere absence of light. It was a physical presence, a gentle deity named Nyx. They envisioned Nyx as a beautiful, shadowy figure draped in a veil of stars, driving her dark chariot across the expanse of the sky, quietly drawing a soft curtain over the exhausted world. She brought with her a profound, soothing coolness, settling the dust of the roads and quieting the wind in the olive groves. More importantly, Nyx was the mother of Hypnos, the gentle god of sleep. As her starry veil covered the earth, Hypnos would descend on silent wings, carrying a branch dipped in the dark, forgetful waters of the river Lethe. He would brush this damp, cooling branch across the foreheads of mortals, dissolving their daily worries, easing the tension in their muscles, and guiding them safely into the restorative, formless landscapes of their dreams. It was the ultimate graceful closing of the day, a transition honoured and welcomed by every living thing as the world gave itself over to the quiet care of the night. When the ancient mind sought answers not in the formless landscapes of those quiet, nocturnal dreams, but in the waking world, it often turned to the softest, most natural sounds of the earth. In the remote mountainous region of Epirus, nestled deep within a lush green valley, stood the oldest oracle in Greece, Dodona. Unlike the dramatic, vapour-filled caves of other sanctuaries, Dodona offered prophecy through the tranquil, ambient rustling of leaves. Here, a massive, ancient oak tree stood at the centre of the sacred precinct. The priests and priestesses, who walked barefoot to maintain an unbroken physical connection to the soil, would stand in silence beneath its vast, spreading canopy. They did not read signs in fire or interpret the stars to find their answers. They simply closed their eyes and listened. As the gentle, cool mountain breezes moved through the thousands of dry, deeply lobed oak leaves, it created a rhythmic, whispering sound like the distant rhythmic wash of ocean waves breaking on a pebbled shore. This soft rustling was interpreted as the direct, murmuring voice of the divine. To find profound wisdom in the quiet rustle of a single tree is to recognize that nature itself is constantly speaking, offering a soothing, ambient wisdom to anyone willing to simply stand still, quiet their own thoughts, and listen. That deep, almost familial reverence for the quiet life of the forest extended into the very fabric of their mythology, weaving humanity and nature into a single, breathing tapestry. The Greeks did not see the woods as merely timber or fuel, but as a living, aware community populated by gentle nymphs known as hamadryads. These were not simply spirits who lived invisibly inside the trees, they were the trees themselves. A hamadryad was believed to be born with a specific sapling, growing as the tree grew, feeling the warmth of the sun on its textured bark, and drinking the cool rainwater from its deep, expanding roots. If you were to walk through a sun-dappled glade of silver poplars or dark, fragrant mountain pines, you were walking among a silent gathering of watching souls. This belief fostered an incredible, necessary gentleness toward the natural landscape. Woodcutters would ask for permission and offer quiet apologies before felling a trunk, ensuring a harmonious balance between human need and the sanctity of the grove. It is a beautiful, grounding perspective to view the towering canopy above not as an inanimate resource, but as a quiet society of silent guardians, their roots intertwined securely beneath the soil, holding the earth together in a massive, unseen embrace. As you imagine the slow, patient life of an ancient tree, anchoring itself deep into the cool, dark earth, your own body might feel a little heavier, a little more grounded. The muscles in your back and legs can release their quiet, lingering tension, melting into the soft support beneath you, just as heavy roots settle into soft, forgiving soil. You do not need to hold yourself up anymore. The earth is here to catch you, and the mind is free to safely wander. From the organic, twisting bark of the ancient oak, the Greek mind possessed the remarkable ability to effortlessly zoom inward, seeking the pure, underlying structure of all physical things. The philosopher Plato looked at the beautiful, chaotic, overgrown mess of the natural world and saw a hidden, perfect geometry resting beneath it all. He popularized the concept of the Platonic solids, 5 three-dimensional shapes of absolute, flawless mathematical symmetry, where every flat face is identical and every internal angle is perfectly equal. These are the tetrahedron, the cube, the octahedron, the dodecahedron, and the icosahedron. He believed these perfectly balanced shapes were the microscopic, invisible building blocks of the universe, the literal geometric shapes of fire, earth, air, water, and the vast cosmos itself. There is something deeply, inherently satisfying about this idea. It suggests that beneath the complicated surface of our daily lives, beneath the unpredictable weather and the changing, shifting seasons, the universe is built on a foundation of absolute stability and geometric calm. It is a universe that fits together perfectly, piece by brilliant piece, in silent, unbreakable mathematical harmony. You can actually find this perfect hidden geometry resting in one of the most soothing, rhythmic environments of the ancient Mediterranean, the quiet darkness of the beehive. High on the rugged, sun-baked slopes of Mount Hymettus, just outside the city of Athens, the air was perpetually thick with the warm scent of wild thyme, oregano, and mountain sage. Here, ancient beekeepers carefully tended to thousands of simple terracotta hives. Inside these dark, quiet clay cylinders, the bees were unknowingly mimicking the perfect mathematics of the philosophers, constructing hexagonal wax cells with microscopic, astonishing precision. The hexagon is nature's most efficient, brilliant shape, tiling perfectly without leaving a single gap or wasting a single drop of effort. The honey produced in these perfectly engineered combs was prized across the known world, famous for its heavy golden clarity and its delicate, deeply herbaceous flavour. To consume it was to taste the concentrated, slow-gathered essence of the mountain summer. The steady, low-frequency hum of 1,000 bees working in total, peaceful harmony is a sound that instinctively lowers the human heart rate, a hypnotic, vibrating purr of a miniature society working together in absolute golden peace. That same steady, rhythmic industry echoed beautifully in the cool, shaded courtyards of Greek homes, where the slow, rhythmic clacking of the upright, warp-weighted loom provided the comforting heartbeat of domestic life. Weaving was not just a chore to be rushed through. It was a highly respected, almost meditative art form that required immense physical patience. A weaver would stand before a tall, heavy wooden frame where dozens of fine, vertical threads were held taut by small, beautifully carved clay or stone weights resting gently near the floor. With a smooth, polished wooden shuttle, they would pass the horizontal threads back and forth, slowly building a fabric row by microscopic row. It was a process that demanded a gentle, rocking, swaying motion of the body and a remarkably quiet, focused mind. A single garment, like a finely spun wool peplos to keep out the winter chill, could take months of quiet dedication to complete. The repetitive, unhurried motion of weaving, the slide of the linen thread, the soft, woody thud of the beater packing the yarn tightly into place, is deeply hypnotic. It is the physical, tangible manifestation of patience, a slow, methodical creation of warmth and protection from 100 delicate individual strands. The steady rhythm of the wooden loom is remarkably like the steady rhythm of a resting pulse. Just as the single threads weave together to form a soft, comforting cloth, let your scattered thoughts weave together and then slowly dissolve into the dark. There is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing you need to accomplish. The day is fully done, the fabric of the hours is finished, and the mind is free to simply float on the gentle rising tide of the breath. This wonderfully unhurried pace of domestic life allowed the ancient Greeks to perceive time itself in a way entirely different from our modern, ticking, anxious clocks. They actually had two completely distinct words for time. The first was chronos, which refers to sequential, chronological time, the steady, unstoppable dropping of sand in an hourglass, the rigid march of days, months, and years. But the second, far more beautiful and forgiving concept was kairos. Kairos is not a rigid measure of seconds, it is a fluid measure of moments. It represents the opportune time, the supreme moment, the exact, perfect instant for something to happen or be felt. While chronos is quantitative and strictly measured, kairos is qualitative and deeply intuitive. It is the quiet, heavy pause right before a summer rainstorm breaks, the perfect moment a peach becomes soft and ripe on the branch, or the feeling of deep, contented silence shared without words between two old friends. To truly understand kairos is to let go of the anxiety of the ticking clock. It is the realization that life is not just a schedule to be maintained, but a series of meaningful, suspended moments waiting to be gently noticed, inhaled, and savoured. You can physically see this fluid, gentle progression of natural time in the elegant way the ancient world measured the daylight. Long before the complex, clicking mechanisms of metal gears or even the rhythmic dripping of water clocks, time was tracked by the silent, stretching language of shadows. The gnomon, a simple vertical stick, bronze pillar, or stone obelisk, was used as the earliest, quietest sundial. As the sun travelled its massive, blindingly golden arc across the Mediterranean sky, the shadow cast by the gnomon would stretch, shrink, and slowly sweep across a carved stone floor. Time was not a sharp, demanding number. It was a soft, shifting shape. It was the long, cool, grey shadow of morning slowly retreating to a small dark pool at the base of the pillar at midday, before stretching out long and thin again toward the east as the quiet evening approached. To check the time was simply to look at the ground and observe the quiet, cosmic relationship between the sun and the earth. It is a wonderfully peaceful, grounding way to navigate the day, guided only by the slow, imperceptible stretching of light and dark, moving exactly at the speed of the spinning planet. The changing, soft light of the morning sun illuminated tasks of incredible, almost impossible delicacy, particularly on the volcanic island of Thera, known today as Santorini. Here, in the crisp, cool, salt-tinged air of dawn, just before the rising sun could dry the morning dew, the islanders engaged in the quietest, most precise harvest in the ancient world, the gathering of saffron. For a few short weeks, the rocky volcanic landscape would bloom with thousands of small, vibrant purple crocus flowers. Inside the protective cup of each blossom were just 3 tiny, brilliant crimson threads, the stigmas of the flower. These threads were so impossibly fragile that they had to be plucked entirely by hand with the utmost gentleness and concentration. It takes about 150 purple blossoms, carefully opened, to produce just a single gram of dry saffron. The walls of ancient buildings in Thera were adorned with stunning, vivid frescoes depicting women carefully, silently moving through the fields, gathering the crimson threads in woven wicker baskets. This spice, worth far more than its weight in heavy gold, was used to dye robes a brilliant sunny yellow and to perfume the air of the temples with a rich, earthy sweetness. The image of the saffron harvest is a masterclass in quiet delicacy, a beautiful reminder that some of the most precious, enduring things in the world require a soft touch, immense patience, and the profound stillness of the early morning. Like the careful, deliberate gathering of those fragile crimson threads, you can carefully, gently gather your own awareness inward now. If any residual noise or tension from the waking day remains, simply let it fall away, evaporating like the cool morning dew in the dawn light. The breath remains perfectly soft. The chest rises and falls without a single ounce of effort, carrying you deeper and deeper into a state of profound, uninterrupted calm. The effortless breath that sustains you in this moment is the exact same mechanism that breathed life into the most haunting, beautiful, and entrancing music of antiquity. While the plucked strings of the lyre were considered the logical instrument of the philosopher, the aulus was the instrument of deep oceanic emotion and hypnotic trance. The aulos was a double-reed wind instrument, consisting of 2 beautifully carved wooden or bone pipes, played simultaneously by a single, highly skilled musician. To maintain the continuous drone-like harmony that characterized its distinct sound, players mastered an astonishing rhythmic technique known as circular breathing. By filling their cheeks with air and using those muscles to steadily push the air through the instrument, they could simultaneously inhale fresh air through their nose. This created an unbroken, continuous looping stream of sound that could last for an astonishing, uninterrupted length of time. The resulting music was deeply immersive, a mesmerizing, weaving tapestry of 2 notes dancing slowly around each other without ever pausing for breath. It was a sound specifically designed to bypass the logical, overthinking mind and speak directly to the resting soul, an endless, flowing river of music that could carry a listener entirely out of their earthly worries and into a state of deep, floating, rhythmic reverie. And as that continuous, reedy breath carried the musical notes up into the cooling night sky, the music eventually faded into a high, distant realm the Greeks believed was fundamentally different from our own. Beyond the heavy clouds, beyond the turbulent winds that rustled the oak leaves and the violent storms that tossed the deep sea, lay the uppermost, untouched atmosphere, known as the ether. The ether was considered the magical 5th element, pure, glowing, and entirely untainted by the dust, gravity, and heaviness of the mortal world below. It was the rarefied air that the gods themselves breathed, the luminous, transparent substance that filled the vast, dark, silent spaces between the turning stars. The Greeks believed that the ether was the ultimate source of all light, a serene, eternal atmosphere of perfect calm, completely untouched by the decay or chaos of the earth. To lay back on the warm marble and look up at the night sky was not just to see distant burning rocks. It was to look through a massive window into this perfect, crystalline, floating realm. It is a deeply comforting, expansive thought to carry as the night deepens around you. The idea that right above us, just beyond the clouds and the heavy atmosphere of the world, there stretches an infinite, quiet ocean of pure, glowing stillness, waiting peacefully in the dark. As you rest beneath that infinite, quiet ocean of pure, glowing ether, imagine its pale silver light drifting down through the atmosphere, slowly illuminating the sleeping earth below. When this celestial light touched the ancient cities of the Mediterranean, it did not fall upon a chaotic, tangled web of dark alleys and confusing streets. Instead, it revealed a landscape of profound, intentional harmony. Long before modern urban planning, a visionary architect named Hippodamus of Miletus looked at the haphazard sprawl of human settlements and decided to bring the perfect mathematical calm of the heavens down to the earth. He invented the grid system. Walking through a city designed by Hippodamus such as Priene was an experience of deep, soothing order. The streets were laid out in a perfectly straight, wide and logical lattice. But this was not just for organisation, it was designed to capture the natural elements. The main avenues were carefully angled so that the fresh, cooling sea breezes could sweep effortlessly through the entire city during the sweltering summer months. Furthermore, the individual houses were constructed facing south, allowing the low, warm rays of the winter sun to penetrate deep into the courtyards, while the overhanging eaves naturally blocked the harsh, blinding heat of the midsummer noon. To live in such a city was to feel that your very home was working in quiet, seamless partnership with the sun and the wind, providing a constant ambient comfort that required no effort at all. Walking down those perfectly aligned, moonlit avenues, you would eventually arrive at the heavy wooden door of an ancient home, a boundary that was governed by one of the most beautiful and deeply respected laws of the ancient world. This was the sacred concept of xenia, the ancient Greek law of hospitality and guest friendship. In a world where travel was slow, exhausting, and often dangerous, the arrival of a stranger at your door was not viewed with suspicion, but with a quiet, profound reverence. The god Zeus himself was known as Zeus Xenios, the protector of wanderers. If a weary traveller knocked on a door in the quiet of the night, the rules of Xenia dictated a beautiful, unhurried ritual of care. Before the host even asked for the stranger's name or where they had come from, the traveller was welcomed inside. They were immediately offered a seat in the most comfortable chair, their dusty feet were gently washed with warm water, and they were served a nourishing meal of fresh bread, dark olives, and sweet wine. Only after their immediate physical needs were met, and their weary body was entirely at rest, would the soft conversation begin. It was a profound societal agreement that anyone, regardless of their origin, deserved safety, warmth, and dignity at the end of a long journey. You too are a welcome guest in this quiet space. There are no questions being asked of you here, and no demands being made. Your breathing can settle into a steady, comfortable rhythm, your shoulders unclenching, trusting the soft, unseen support beneath you as you simply rest by the fire. At the very centre of that welcoming ancient home, casting a soft, flickering and endlessly comforting glow across the stone floor, was the hearth. This physical fire was the domain of Hestia, the gentlest and most peaceful of all the Olympian deities. Unlike the other gods who engaged in loud battles or dramatic affairs, Hestia possessed no myths of conflict. She was said to have willingly given up her grand throne on Mount Olympus to simply sit quietly by the warm ashes of the fire. She represented the absolute unbreakable centre of domestic tranquility. But this comforting warmth extended far beyond individual houses. At the physical and spiritual centre of every ancient Greek city stood the Parthenon, a public hall housing a sacred communal hearth where the fire was never, ever allowed to burn out. It was tended day and night, a continuous glowing heartbeat for the entire community. And when a group of citizens prepared to sail across the vast dark sea to establish a new colony on a distant shore, they did not simply leave their home behind. They would take a beautifully crafted bronze vessel and carefully place within it glowing white-hot coals from the mother city's eternal fire. They carried this quiet, living ember across the ocean, using it to kindle the very first flame in their new settlement. Even separated by hundreds of miles of deep water, they remained intimately, warmly connected by the exact same continuous thread of light. The soft, golden light of those eternal fires would often dance across the surfaces of magnificent marble statues, illuminating a texture that seems almost impossible for solid rock to possess. When we look at ancient Greek sculpture, we're often struck by how the hard, unyielding stone appears as soft, supple, and warm as living human skin. This breathtaking illusion was not achieved through violent chiseling, but through an incredibly slow, patient process of smoothing. After the rough shape was carved, the artisan would employ a special dense mineral gathered from the quiet, rocky shores of the island of Naxos. This was Naxian emery, an incredibly hard, granular rock. The sculptor would crush the emery into a fine, dark sand, mix it with cool water to create an abrasive paste, and then begin the mesmerizing process of rubbing the marble. For weeks, and sometimes months, they would perform this gentle, repetitive, circular motion over the curves of the stone. The friction was microscopic, slowly wearing away the rigid crystalline edges of the marble until the surface became perfectly smooth, reflecting the ambient light with a soft, glowing translucence. It is a profound reminder that the most rigid, unyielding obstacles in the world can be softened and transformed not by sudden, forceful strikes, but by the slow, gentle, and consistent application of patient care. This patient, deliberate harnessing of natural elements was not limited to the earth and the stone. It extended into the realm of water and sound, creating an atmosphere of majestic, continuous harmony. In the great Hellenistic city of Alexandria, an ingenious inventor named Ctesibius observed the steady, heavy pressure of water and realized it could be used to breathe life into music. He invented the hydraulis, the world's very first keyboard instrument and the direct ancestor of the modern pipe organ. Unlike the wind instruments that required the exhausting breath of a human player, the hydraulis relied on a massive bell-shaped bronze chamber submerged in a pool of water. As air was pumped into the chamber, the heavy, constant weight of the displaced water would push the air back up through a series of tuned metal and wooden pipes with absolute, unwavering, and perfect pressure. When the musician gently pressed the large, flat wooden keys, the instrument released a smooth, resonant, and incredibly powerful chord that never wavered or broke for breath. The sound was vast and encompassing, a deep oceanic hum that could fill entire amphitheatres or echo softly through the grand, marble-lined streets. It was the sound of human ingenuity partnering with the massive, quiet weight of water, creating an endless, effortless stream of melody. Just as the heavy, steady water anchors the music, allow gravity to gently anchor you in this moment. The body can grow delightfully heavier, sinking just a fraction of an inch deeper into absolute comfort. There is nothing you need to hold up, and nothing you need to carry. The low, resonant notes of that aquatic instrument might easily have drifted over the high, sun-baked walls of Alexandria's most peaceful and sacred sanctuary, the Great Library. Inside those vast, naturally cooled stone halls, a different kind of quiet, monumental effort was taking place. The library contained hundreds of thousands of papyrus scrolls, holding the accumulated knowledge, dreams, poetry, and science of the ancient world. But a massive room full of scrolls is merely a chaotic forest of paper without a map. A brilliant poet and scholar named Callimachus took on the profoundly soothing task of organizing this vast ocean of thought. He created the Pinakes, which translates to the tables, marking the invention of the very first library catalogue in human history. Callimachus spent years walking softly through the hushed, dusty aisles, unrolling fragile papyri, breathing in the scent of dried reeds and dark ink. He meticulously categorized every single scroll by subject, mathematics, medicine, epic poetry, laws, and then arranged the authors in perfect alphabetical order, writing down brief, elegant biographies for each one. There is a deep psychological comfort in the act of sorting, in taking a massive, overwhelming amount of information and giving every single piece a specific, safe, and easily discoverable home. The Pinnocks transformed a mountain of scattered thoughts into a quiet, perfectly navigable garden of the mind. Among those hundreds of thousands of carefully catalogued scrolls, resting silently on the cedar shelves, were the records of journeys that stretched far beyond the warm, sunlit shores of the Mediterranean. One such record belonged to Pythias, a brilliant navigator and geographer from the Greek colony of Massalia. While most sailors clung to the familiar, predictable coasts of the inland sea, Pythias sailed his wooden ship out through the Pillars of Hercules and turned north, venturing deep into the cold, unknown expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. He sailed further north than any Greek before him, eventually reaching a land he called Thule, near the Arctic Circle. The descriptions he brought back read like a quiet, surreal dream. He told the sun-drenched Greeks of a place where the summer sun simply refused to set, hovering gently above the horizon at midnight in a continuous golden twilight. He described the aurora borealis, a phenomenon of silent, ghostly lights dancing slowly across the frozen night sky. Most remarkably, he described reaching a point where the ocean itself stopped acting like water. He called it the sluggish sea, describing how the water thickened and froze into an undulating, icy slush that resembled a massive, translucent jellyfish, where a ship could neither sail nor a person walk. To imagine an ancient Greek standing at the frozen, silent edge of the world, watching the ocean turn to quiet, suspended ice, is to feel the profound, humbling vastness of a planet that is endlessly strange and beautifully diverse. To return from that silent, frozen edge of the world in the north back to the heart of ancient Athens is to experience the most dramatic, joyful shift in temperature and atmosphere. As the short, cold days of the Mediterranean winter finally broke, the entire city would exhale in relief and celebrate the Antikythera, the oldest and gentlest of the festivals dedicated to Dionysus. This was the festival of the flowers and the opening of the new wine. For 3 days, the rigid rules of society were softly set aside. The heavy clay amphorae containing the wine that had been quietly fermenting in the cool dark of the cellars all winter were finally unsealed, filling the air with a rich, dark, intoxicating sweetness. But the true beauty of the festival lay in its quietest participants. Children, who had survived the vulnerability of the winter season, were dressed in soft, brightly coloured tunics and crowned with thick, fragrant wreaths woven from the very first spring blossoms, violets, hyacinths, and wild narcissus. They were given miniature, beautifully painted clay jugs to taste the sweet, unfermented grape juice. The city was briefly transformed into a garden of profound collective relief. It was a societal acknowledgement of survival, a gentle, cyclical reassurance that no matter how cold and dark the winter becomes, the earth will always eventually soften, the vines will always wake up, and the heavy sweetness of the first blooms will always return to fill the air. There is no need to rush your own natural cycles. Just as the earth intuitively knows how to slowly thaw and when to bloom, your mind knows exactly how to let go, thought by thought, petal by petal, into the dark, restorative quiet of the night. This deep structural belief in the slow, deliberate nurturing of life formed the absolute core of their highest philosophical ideal, eudaimonia. Often simply translated in modern times as happiness, the true ancient meaning of the word is much richer, deeper, and far more relaxing. Eudaimonia literally translates to having a good guiding spirit, and it refers to the concept of human flourishing. The philosopher Aristotle believed that this state was not a fleeting, manic feeling of joy, nor was it a sudden thrill or a temporary pleasure. Instead, eudaimonia was the ultimate, lifelong goal of a human being. It was achieved by slowly, patiently cultivating your own virtues, courage, temperance, gentleness, and wisdom over the course of decades. It is a philosophy that views the human soul not as a machine to be optimized, but as a garden to be quietly and constantly tended. A sudden storm might damage a few branches, and a drought might test the roots, but a well-tended garden will always continue to quietly grow and flourish. It removes the exhausting modern pressure to be constantly, loudly happy, replacing it with the deeply soothing goal of simply being rooted, balanced, and gently growing into the best, most authentic version of yourself over a long, unhurried lifetime. This desire to capture, hold, and perfectly preserve the fleeting beauty of a flourishing world was sometimes expressed in objects of astonishing microscopic wonder. In the same quiet underwater shipwreck where divers discovered the bronze gears of the Antikythera Mechanism, they also found fragments of something equally mesmerizing: Hellenistic Millefiori glass. The name literally means 1,000 flowers. To create these incredibly delicate silent gardens of glass, ancient artisans would take long, thin rods of brightly coloured glass, deep blues, vibrant yellows, opaque whites, and rich reds, and bundle them together in specific geometric patterns. They would heat the bundle just enough to fuse the rods together into a single thick cane. Then, with unbelievable precision, they would slice this cane into paper-thin cross-sections. Each tiny slice revealed a perfect, complex, multicoloured flower suspended in the glass. The artisan would then carefully arrange hundreds of these tiny glass flowers inside a smooth clay mould and heat them gently until they melted together, fusing into a single, flawless, translucent bowl. To hold a Millefiori bowl in your hands is to hold a meadow of spring flowers perfectly frozen in time. It is smooth, cool to the touch, and completely immune to the changing of the seasons or the fading of the light. It is a quiet masterpiece of suspension, capturing the brightest moments of the waking world and settling them perfectly into a shape that will rest, undisturbed and beautiful, for thousands of years. Just as that delicate multicoloured glass was crafted to hold a perfect, unchanging reflection of a spring garden, the ancient Greeks developed a profound appreciation for the gentle, quiet art of capturing their own reflection. Before the invention of the harsh, hyper-clear silvered glass mirrors we use today, to see one's own face was a distinctly softer, more forgiving experience. Ancient Greek artisans created mirrors from heavy, solid discs of bronze. Through a breathtakingly patient process of burnishing, using progressively finer grades of sand and oil, they would polish the metal until the surface became smooth enough to catch the light. Because it was bronze, the reflection it offered was not a stark, brightly lit replica, but rather a warm, slightly golden, and beautifully diffused interpretation of the viewer. Looking into a bronze mirror in the soft, angled light of the early morning, or the warm, flickering glow of an evening oil lamp felt less like a strict examination, and more like encountering a gentle, painted portrait of oneself. These mirrors were often protected by beautifully engraved folding covers, turning the act of opening the mirror into a deliberate, quiet ritual, a private moment to pause, breathe, and greet the quietest version of yourself before stepping out into the loud, bustling world of the city. When the bronze cover of the mirror was closed and the day surrendered to the night, the ancient mind turned away from the waking reflection and began to navigate the vast internal landscapes of the sleeping self. Rather than fearing the bizarre and unpredictable nature of dreams, they sought to understand them with a comforting, almost scholarly gentleness. In the 2nd century, a man named Artemidorus of Daldis spent years walking softly through the busy marketplaces and quiet courtyards of the Mediterranean, doing nothing but listening to people describe their dreams. He compiled these thousands of nocturnal visions into a massive, meticulously organised work called the Oneirocritica. Artemidorus did not view dreams as terrifying omens or punishments from angry gods. Instead, he treated the subconscious mind as a completely natural, deeply personal environment that possessed its own unique internal logic. He acted as a quiet librarian of the night, cataloguing the gentle, strange pathways of the human imagination. He suggested that the mind, when unburdened by the bright light and heavy gravity of the waking day, simply uses images as a soft, symbolic language to sort through our memories, to heal our anxieties, and to gently prepare us for the morning. Your own mind is entirely free to wander those ancient, softly mapped pathways now. The body can grow delightfully heavier, sinking just a fraction of an inch deeper into the soft space beneath you. You do not need to direct your thoughts. You can simply let them spool out into the dark, trusting the quiet internal logic of your own rest. As you drift through those internal landscapes, you might find that the mind often summons the most comforting, grounding sensations of the waking world, and none is more deeply soothing than a scent the Greeks themselves named. When a long, dry Mediterranean summer was finally broken by the sudden arrival of dark clouds and a heavy, cooling afternoon rain shower, a specific, intoxicating fragrance would rise up from the baked earth. The Greeks called this scent petrichor. The word is a beautiful marriage of petra, meaning the stone of the earth, and ichor, the golden, ethereal fluid that was said to flow through the veins of the immortal gods. They believed this deeply calming, earthy aroma was literally the divine breath of the planet being released from the rocks. Modern science now knows that during long dry spells, plants excrete microscopic, soothing oils that are absorbed by clay soils and limestone. When the cool rainwater finally hits the thirsty ground, these ancient stored oils are gently aerosolized, releasing a fragrant, grounding perfume into the air. To breathe deeply during the first rain of the season is to inhale the absolute essence of relief, a physical, chemical reminder that every long drought eventually ends, and the earth always knows exactly how to soften, drink, and renew itself. That profound desire to capture the soothing, restorative essence of nature and apply it directly to the human body led to one of the most comforting inventions of antiquity. While we often think of skincare as a modern luxury, it was a Greek physician named Galen who formulated the world's very first true moisturizing emulsion, a profoundly relaxing balm that became known as Ceratum Galeni, or cold cream. Galen understood the fundamental tactile need for the skin to be soothed after a long day in the hot, drying sun. In his quiet, fragrant workshop, he achieved a magnificent, delicate alchemy. He carefully melted pure, sweet-smelling beeswax, blending it with rich, golden olive oil, and then, with immense patience, he slowly whisked in clear, distilled rosewater. The result was a thick, luxurious snow-white cream. The magic of this ancient invention lay in its physical reaction with the body. When smoothed over the tired muscles of the face or the temples, the warmth of the skin would cause the delicate rosewater trapped in the wax to slowly evaporate. This gentle evaporation drew the heat away from the body, creating an immediate, deeply relaxing cooling sensation, accompanied by the soft, comforting scent of crushed roses. It was a masterpiece of pharmaceutical gentleness, a way to literally coat the body in the cool, quiet peace of a shaded flower garden. The application of that cooling, rose-scented cream was often the final luxurious step in a much larger, beautifully orchestrated ritual of physical surrender, a visit to the Balneaeon, the ancient public bathhouse. These were not simply places to wash, they were vast, echoing sanctuaries dedicated entirely to the slow, methodical unknotting of human tension. Imagine stepping out of the bright, noisy street and into a space built entirely of smooth, cool marble and warm, heavy steam. The transition was intentionally gradual. You would move slowly from the cool air of the dressing room into the tepidarium, a wonderfully warm, transitional space where the air felt like a soft, heavy blanket. The floor beneath your bare feet would radiate a deep, soothing heat. This was achieved by a brilliant piece of hidden engineering called the Hypocauste system, where a gentle, continuous wood fire burned outside the building, sending its warm, smoke-free air flowing silently through an empty space beneath the floorboards and up through hollow clay pipes hidden inside the walls. The entire building hummed with an invisible ambient warmth, surrounded by the beautifully calming, echoing acoustics of water gently splashing into stone basins. The muscles of the neck and the shoulders would instinctively let go of their rigid hold, melting completely into the heavy, supportive steam. Like that heavy, warm steam settling over smooth stone, let the breath settle softly in the chest. There is no need to push or pull the air. It moves effortlessly on its own. The hands and the feet can become completely loose, completely still, as the entire weight of the day simply washes away into the floor. After the profound, echoing relaxation of the baths, returning home meant retreating to the quietest, most protected room of the ancient Greek house, the gyneceum. This was the women's quarters, a space of calm domestic industry and deep, unhurried rituals. One of the most beautiful and tactile of these daily routines was the complex meditative art of hair braiding. In a world before hurried morning routines, styling hair was a deliberate grounding process that required the gentle, focused touch of another person. Using fine-toothed combs carved from smooth bone or polished wood, a companion would slowly part the heavy, damp hair. They would massage tiny drops of olive oil, infused with a calming sense of crushed marjoram or powdery iris root, into the scalp. Then, with incredibly steady rhythmic movements, they would weave the long strands into intricate, secure crowns or cascading woven patterns. This was not merely an act of vanity. It was a shared, silent language of care. The slow, repetitive, rocking motion of braiding, the soft, rhythmic pulling, and the heavy, comforting weight of the finished, secure hair provided a deeply soothing anchor at the start or the end of the day. It was a daily reminder of the beauty found in slow, deliberate, and entirely focused human connection. The intricate, woven strands of those quiet morning braids were a perfect, physical reflection of the beautiful, continuous lines painted on the walls and the pottery that surrounded them in the home. One of the most iconic, mesmerizing patterns created by the ancient Greek mind is the meander, often known today as the Greek key. If you trace this pattern with your eyes, a geometric line that moves forward, folds back on itself at a perfect right angle, drops down, and then moves forward again, you might initially think it looks like a complex, rigid maze designed to trap you. But the deep, comforting secret of the meander is that it is not a maze at all. It is a single, unbroken, continuous line. It was inspired by the twisting, turning path of the Meandros River in Asia Minor. The Greeks painted this pattern on the borders of their most precious objects because it was the ultimate symbol of infinity and the eternal flow of time. It offers a profoundly reassuring philosophy. Even when the path of your life seems to double back, even when it changes direction sharply or feels like it is moving away from its goal, it is still part of one continuous, unbroken, and inherently beautiful journey. There are no dead ends in the meander, only the steady rhythmic progression of a single endlessly flowing stream. While the right angles of the meander perfectly mapped the twisting path of a river, another brilliant mind sought to map the gentle, sweeping curves of the natural world, discovering a geometry of absolute, unhurried peace. The great mathematician Archimedes of Syracuse spent his life studying the quiet mathematics hidden in the earth. One of his most beautiful discoveries was the Archimedean spiral. Unlike a circle, which is closed and final, the spiral is a shape of continuous, predictable, and gentle expansion. Archimedes observed this specific mathematically perfect curve in the slow, sleepy unfurling of a new fern frond in the damp forest, in the tight protective coil of a resting millipede, and in the beautiful expanding rings of a nautilus shell. He proved that the distance between the rings of this spiral always remains exactly the same as it grows outward. It is the visual representation of a natural object taking exactly the time and space it needs to grow, moving outward at a steady, peaceful, and perfectly balanced rate. To look at the Archimedean spiral is to look at a mathematical proof that the universe does not always rush or force its way forward. Sometimes it simply unwinds, slowly and perfectly, at its own quiet internal pace. We can see a beautiful living reflection of this internal, hidden geometry in one of the most revered and slow-growing plants of the ancient Mediterranean, the majestic fig tree. The Greeks deeply prized the fig, but it holds a quiet, wonderful secret that makes it entirely unique in the natural world. The fig is not actually a fruit at all. Botanically, it is a syconium, a completely enclosed inverted flower. Unlike the bold, bright blossoms of the apple or the cherry tree, which open their petals wide to brave the elements and attract the buzzing world, the fig tree makes a different choice. Its hundreds of tiny, delicate blossoms bloom entirely on the inside, suspended in absolute privacy within a soft, dark, protective teardrop of green skin. To hold a fig in your hand is to hold a secret, hidden garden of tiny, honey-sweet flowers that have grown to maturity without ever exposing themselves to the harsh light or the chaotic wind. It is a biological masterpiece of internal, quiet flourishing. It reminds us that immense growth and profound sweetness do not always need to be displayed or validated by the outside world. Sometimes, the most beautiful things we cultivate are grown slowly, safely, and entirely within. You too can draw your energy inward now, away from the loud, demanding edges of the day. Like the quiet flower blooming safely inside the fig, your mind can rest deeply in its own private, safe, and entirely protected space. Nothing needs to be held too tightly. From that deeply internal, protected space of the mind, the ancient philosophers developed a final, magnificent mental exercise designed to soothe all remaining earthly anxieties. The Stoic philosophers called it the view from above. When the noise of the city became too loud, or the pressures of daily life felt too heavy, a Stoic would close their eyes and slowly, deliberately imagine their awareness lifting out of their body. They would picture themselves floating upward, silently rising past the red-tiled roofs of the houses, lifting above the massive white marble columns of the temples, and drifting straight through the cool, damp layers of the clouds. They would continue this slow, imaginary ascent until they were looking down at the earth from the silent, freezing, completely peaceful expanse of the stars. From this vast cosmic distance, all human conflicts, all loud arguments, and all immediate pressing worries shrink down into invisible, weightless specks. The borders between nations disappear, and the grand, spinning planet reveals itself as a tiny, quiet marble floating in an infinite, supportive dark. It is a profound, expansive release, the ultimate comforting perspective that everything that troubles us is fleeting, everything is manageable, and the universe holding us is vast, slow, and endlessly quiet. From that silent, freezing, completely peaceful expanse of the stars, looking down at the earth reveals the sheer, humbling vastness of the cosmos. But when the ancient Greeks stood on their sun-warmed shores and looked upward into that exact same dark expanse, they did not see a terrifying, empty void. They saw a deeply comforting, familiar narrative painted in light. On a clear, moonless night in the Mediterranean, far from the glare of city fires, the sky is bisected by a breathtaking, luminous band of clustered stars and glowing celestial dust. We call it the Milky Way, but this name is a direct whispering echo of the ancient Greek imagination. They called this glowing river of light Galaxias Kyklos, which literally translates to the Milky Circle. According to their most gentle myths, this glowing path was formed when the goddess Hera, the protector of women and children, spilled a few drops of divine milk from the heavens. These drops cascaded across the dark canvas of the night, pooling into an endless shimmering stream that wrapped entirely around the globe. To look up at the Galaxias was to feel a profound sense of cosmic nourishment. It transformed the cold, incomprehensible depths of outer space into something intimate, maternal, and infinitely providing. a soft white river of light flowing steadily through the highest, darkest reaches of the world. Just below that glowing celestial river, the atmosphere of the earth moved in entirely predictable, deeply comforting rhythms that the Greeks learned to trust with their lives. In the heart of the sweltering summer, when the Mediterranean sun baked the rocky islands and the air grew thick and heavy, the entire Aegean region would collectively anticipate the arrival of the Etesians, known today as the Meltemi winds. These were not the chaotic, destructive gales of winter storms, but a wonderfully steady, reliable and cooling breath that swept down from the north. The Etesians begin to blow quietly in the morning, gradually gathering strength to provide a beautiful, natural air conditioning through the hottest hours of the afternoon, before gently dying down into a perfect glassy calm just as the sun sets. For ancient sailors, these winds were a gift of supreme, quiet machinery. A captain could raise a square linen sail and trust entirely in this steady, invisible hand to push their heavy wooden merchant ship smoothly and safely across the open water. To understand the Etesian winds is to realise that the atmosphere itself has a slow, reliable heartbeat, a deep, cyclical breath that dependably cools the fever of the summer and safely guides the wanderer toward their destination. When those ships finally dropped their heavy iron anchors in the calm, sheltered bays, they often shared the water with individuals who possessed an astonishing, profound relationship with the absolute silence of the deep. On the rocky island of Kalymnos, a society of entirely unique artisans made their living by leaving the noisy, brightly lit surface world behind. These were the legendary sponge divers. Long before the invention of breathing apparatus or pressurized suits, a Kalymnian diver would stand on the edge of a small wooden boat, holding a flat, teardrop-shaped piece of heavy marble called a scandala petra. Taking one massive final breath of the warm sea air, they would step off the edge and let the heavy stone pull them rapidly down into the darkening blue. As they descended 30, 40 or even 50 feet beneath the surface, the bright chaotic sounds of the splashing waves and the calling gulls instantly vanished, replaced by an encompassing, heavy and majestic silence. At the bottom of the sea, in a state of complete weightlessness, the diver would gently harvest the natural sea sponges, organisms of pure, incredible softness that clung to the rocky reefs. This brief, intense journey into the silent, pressurized heart of the ocean, moving gracefully in the cold, blue dark, was a daily physical surrender to a world completely untouched by human anxiety. As you imagine that slow, weightless descent through the cool blue water, you might notice your own body growing wonderfully heavy, sinking into a space of complete, undisturbed quiet. The breath can slow down, measuring itself perfectly, holding on to nothing. You're entirely buoyant, entirely safe, suspended in a space where the noise of the surface simply cannot reach you. The profound physical stillness achieved by those divers at the bottom of the sea was the exact state of mind that Greek philosophers spent their entire lives trying to cultivate on land. They called this ultimate mental and emotional sanctuary sophrosin. It is a word that defies a simple single translation, but it encompasses the beautiful, quiet ideals of temperance, self-restraint, and absolute mental clarity. Sophrosine is the opposite of a mind caught in a frantic, exhausting storm of desires, anxieties, and extreme emotions. It is the mental equivalent of a perfectly still, deep pool of cool water hidden inside a shaded limestone cave. Water so clear and undisturbed that it perfectly reflects the sky above it without a single ripple. To practice sophrosine was to deliberately choose a life of gentle moderation, recognizing that the pursuit of endless wealth, wild passions, or constant loud attention ultimately fragments the soul. It was an active daily choice to lower the volume of one's own ego, to pause before reacting, and to find the deepest, most enduring joy in the quiet, simple balance of the present moment. It is a deeply healing philosophy, a gentle reminder that a well-ordered, peaceful mind is the greatest, most unshakable fortress a human being can ever build. This desire for a well-ordered, balanced mind found a remarkably tactile, rhythmic expression in the quiet courtyards and shaded stowers of the ancient cities, where people gathered to engage in the slow, deliberate meditation of board games. One of the most beloved was a game called Parthenon, meaning pebbles. Unlike modern games characterized by flashing lights, loud timers, or frantic speed, Parthenon was a study in profound strategic patience. The game was played on a simple wooden board etched with a precise geometric grid, using beautifully polished smooth stones of contrasting colours, perhaps white marble and dark obsidian. The players would sit in companionable silence, surrounded by the scent of the nearby gardens, slowly and thoughtfully sliding their cool, heavy stones across the wooden intersections. The only sound was the satisfying rhythmic click of a polished pebble being gently placed onto the board, followed by long stretches of deep, concentrated thought. It was a miniaturized, perfectly safe battlefield, where the mind could focus entirely on logic, positioning, and the graceful, slow-motion dance of strategy. To play a game of Parthenon was to practice the art of moving deliberately, proving that immense mental engagement does not require chaos or noise, but thrives most beautifully in an environment of tactile, unhurried calm. The hands that patiently moved those heavy polished stones across the wooden grids were also capable of cultivating and weaving materials of almost impossible, ethereal lightness. While heavy wool and practical linen were the standard fabrics of daily life, the ancient Greeks also possessed a profound understanding of a textile so delicate it was often compared to holding a captured breeze. On the lush, verdant island of Kos, local women mastered the incredibly complex, delicate art of harvesting wild silk. This was Koa vestis, the legendary Koan silk. Unlike the domesticated silkworms of the Far East, the caterpillars of Kos spun their cocoons in the high, rustling branches of oak and ash trees. The silk threads extracted from these wild cocoons were microscopically fine, requiring an extraordinary trance-like level of focus to carefully spin and weave on a lightweight wooden loom. The resulting fabric was almost completely translucent, possessing a soft, pearlescent shimmer that caught the sunlight. The Roman historian Pliny the Elder later marvelled at this Greek creation, describing the garments as woven wind, a fabric that draped over the body but weighed absolutely nothing at all. To wear Koan silk was to feel the barest, softest whisper of a material against the skin, an incredible testament to the human ability to coax something of magical, floating delicacy out of the rugged natural world. Imagine that sensation for just a moment, a fabric lighter than air, gently resting against your shoulders, carrying absolutely no weight, asking for no effort to support it. As your mind untangles from the tight, heavy threads of the waking day, it can become just as light, just as unburdened, floating as softly as woven wind in a quiet room. That deep, inherent gentleness extended far beyond the clothes they wore. It was deeply woven into the way they treated and healed the physical body from the inside out. In the remote, jagged peaks of the Greek mountains, above the tree line where the air is thin, crisp, and incredibly pure, grows a small, unassuming, and deeply powerful plant known as sideritis. For thousands of years, shepherds and philosophers alike have carefully hand-foraged these fuzzy, silver-green stems and tiny, pale yellow flowers to brew the legendary Greek mountain tea. The preparation of this tea was a slow, deeply comforting daily ritual. A handful of the dried, aromatic blossoms would be placed into an earthen clay pot filled with fresh, cold spring water and slowly brought to a gentle, rolling simmer over a low fire. As the water warmed, it would transform into a brilliant, translucent golden hue, releasing a complex, incredibly soothing aroma that smells of dry earth, sweet honey, and subtle, woody pine. Sideritis contains no caffeine, no harsh stimulants to race the heart or agitate the mind. Instead, it is naturally packed with antioxidants and mild, natural sedatives that gently lower blood pressure and coat the throat. To sit by a fire and cup a warm clay bowl of mountain tea is to physically ingest the quiet, enduring strength of the high altitudes, allowing a warm, golden and deeply earthy peace to slowly spread through the chest and settle the stomach. The most perfect protected place to sip that warm golden tea and simply watch the day fade was the absolute architectural heart of the ancient Greek home, the peristyle courtyard. While modern homes often in the very centre, there was often a small, carefully tended garden of fragrant herbs or an intricately tiled mosaic floor gently sloping toward a central drain designed to catch the soft, vital rainwater of the winter storms and funnel it into a cool, dark cistern below the earth. By placing the open space in the absolute centre of the structure, the house created its own, perfect microclimate. It was a space that captured the brightest square of blue sky, the gentlest cross breezes, and the quietest, most private starlight, all while completely muffling the chaotic, exhausting sounds of the bustling city just a few feet away. It is the ultimate architectural expression of an introverted sanctuary, a physical reminder that we all need a quiet, walled-off centre where the noise of the world cannot reach us. Within the perfectly balanced, echoing acoustics of that hidden courtyard, the evening air was often filled with the deeply resonant, vibratory hum of the most revered instrument of the ancient world. While the light, hollow tortoise shell of the lyre was common, the kithara was an instrument of profound, heavy, and majestic construction. It was built from thick, carefully aged blocks of dense wood, carved into a massive U-shaped sounding box. The strings, made from tightly wound, cured sheep gut, were stretched with immense tension across the wooden bridge. When a highly trained musician struck these thick strings with a carved plectrum, the resulting sound was not a delicate, high-pitched plink, but a deep, oceanic, and incredibly sustaining vibration. The sound of the kithara possessed a heavy acoustic gravity. If you were sitting in the courtyard, you would not just hear the music with your ears, you would physically feel the low, rich frequencies resonating gently in the centre of your chest. The Greeks believed this specific, deep harmonic vibration had the power to literally realign a scattered soul, acting as a sonic anchor that could immediately slow a racing heart and draw the wandering mind back down into the heavy, resting physical body. Let your own chest rise and fall to the rhythm of that deep internal hum. There are no harsh noises here, no sudden alarms to jolt the system. There is only the deeply resonant, supportive vibration of absolute rest, echoing softly through the quiet architecture of the body, telling every muscle that the day's work is finally entirely done. As the deep, warm notes of the kithara drifted upward through the open roof of the peristyle courtyard, they would eventually rise to meet a specific, brilliant cluster of stars that served as one of the most comforting, reliable guides in the ancient night sky. This was the Pleiades. To the naked eye, it appears as a tiny, incredibly dense, and beautifully glittering cluster of pale blue diamonds hovering close together in the vast dark. In Greek mythology, these were the 7 sisters, the gentle daughters of the Titan Atlas, who were transformed into stars by Zeus to protect them from the relentless pursuit of the hunter Orion. But beyond the myth, this tiny cluster of stars provided a quiet visual calendar that structured the entire ancient world. Because the Pleiades are so distinct, their movements were deeply trusted. When the cluster first became visible on the horizon just before sunrise in the spring, it was the ultimate silent signal to the farmers that the earth was finally warm enough to safely plough, and to the sailors that the violent winter storms had passed, making the dark sea safe to navigate once again. The Pleiades did not shout, they simply appeared, twinkling softly in the cold air, offering a reliable, luminous promise that the harshness of the winter was over, and a season of growth, travel, and safe passage was quietly unfolding across the world. That soft blue twinkling of the Pleiades served as a celestial lighthouse for the mariner, but for those whose lives were rooted in the dark, fragrant soil of the valleys, the changing of the seasons was measured by a much more terrestrial, yet equally magical transformation. Deep in the limestone caves and sheltered crevices of the Peloponnesian hills, a tiny, industrious miracle would occur every spring. The ancient Greeks observed with quiet wonder the life of the silkworm, though they understood it through a lens of profound mythic beauty. Long before the silk roads from the east were fully paved, they noticed the bombyx mori spinning its singular unbroken thread. To the Greek mind, this was not just a biological process, but a masterpiece of focused, solitary patience. A single cocoon is composed of a thread that can stretch for nearly 1,000 yards if gently unwound. They saw in this a lesson of the great work performed in silence. It reveals that the most exquisite, enduring beauty, the kind that can be woven into the robes of kings, is often created in total stillness, wrapped in a protective shell of one's own making. It suggests that our own periods of withdrawal, of quiet rest and internal focus, are not empty times, but the very moments when we are weaving the most refined versions of our future selves. This appreciation for the hidden, internal workings of nature transitions seamlessly into the way the Greeks viewed the very stones that built their world. While we see the great temples of marble as static monuments, the ancient builders viewed the earth as a living, shifting entity that required a gentle, flexible touch. In the construction of the massive white marble columns that line the Parthenon, they did not rely on rigid, unyielding cement to hold the drums together. Instead, they used a system of ingenious hidden joints. At the centre of each massive stone drum, they carved a small, square hollow and inserted a block of cedar wood, which in turn held a lead-encased iron dowel. This was not merely for strength, but for resilience. Because lead is a soft, malleable metal, it acted as a seismic shock absorber. When the earth beneath Athens groaned or shifted with the subtle movements of the tectonic plates, the massive columns did not shatter or snap. They swayed, almost imperceptibly, absorbing the energy of the earth with a metallic cushioned grace. It is a profound architectural metaphor for the resting mind. True strength does not come from being perfectly rigid or brittle, but from having a soft, protected centre that allows us to absorb the tremors of life without breaking, remaining upright and balanced even when the ground beneath us is uncertain. As you picture those massive silver-white columns standing firm against the sky, you can feel a similar sense of structural release within your own body. The weight of your head is fully supported by the pillow. The spine can lengthen and soften, letting go of the need to hold yourself upright. Like the lead in the temple's heart, you're becoming heavy, grounded, and beautifully resilient, allowing all the tension of the day to simply sink away, leaving behind only a steady, unshakable peace. The same lead that protected the temples in silence was often used in a much more intimate, fluid way to navigate the mysteries of the human heart and the longing for resolution. In the sacred precinct of Dodona, alongside the rustling oak leaves we explored before, archaeologists have found hundreds of small, thin tablets made of soft, hammered lead. These were not grand decrees of state, but the quiet, private whispers of ordinary people. A person would take a small, dull stylus and gently etch a question into the forgiving surface of the lead, perhaps asking if they would find success in a new venture, or if a distant loved one was safe. They would then roll the lead tablet into a tiny secretive scroll and bury it in the earth, or cast it into a sacred spring. There is something deeply moving about the texture of these requests. Lead is a heavy, dull metal, but it is also remarkably soft. It holds the mark of a human hand with ease. By committing their anxieties to the weight of the metal and giving it back to the earth, these ancient seekers were practicing a literal offloading of their worries. It reminds us that there is a profound healing power in the act of externalizing our thoughts, of letting them rest in a physical form so that our minds can finally be still, freed from the burden of carrying every unanswered question into the night. This search for harmony between the heavy materials of the earth and the light, fleeting desires of the soul, led to the creation of the most beautiful and mathematically perfect landscape in the ancient world, the sacred grove of Olympia. While we remember it for the roar of the games, the site itself was designed to be a sanctuary of Altes, or the enclosure. Here, the architecture was intentionally spaced to mirror the natural rhythm of the surrounding wild olive and plane trees. The Greeks practiced a concept known as temenos, the carving out of a piece of land from the common world to be dedicated to the spirit of peace. Within this space, all conflict was strictly forbidden by a sacred truce known as ekcheria, which literally means the holding of hands. For the duration of the games, travellers from warring cities could walk the same paths, sleep under the same stars, and wash in the same river without fear. It reveals that the ancient world understood the necessity of islands of peace, specific times and places where the struggles of the world are not just paused, but fundamentally dissolved. Your current space, your bed, your room, is your own personal temenos. It is a sacred enclosure where the conflicts of the day are legally, spiritually and physically barred from entry, allowing you to breathe the pure, undisturbed air of absolute safety. Within those sacred enclosures, the air was often filled with a sound that the Greeks believed possessed the power to literally reorganize the atoms of the human spirit. This was the music of the monochord, a single-stringed instrument used by the followers of Pythagoras. Unlike the complex, multi-stringed kithara, the monochord was a tool of pure, singular focus. It consisted of a long wooden sound box with a single string stretched across it and a movable bridge. By sliding the bridge to exact mathematical points, a student could hear the pure intervals of the universe, the perfect fifth, the perfect fourth, the perfect octave. They would pluck the string and let the single, clear note ring out until it faded into the very edge of audibility. This was known as sonorous meditation. The sound did not demand attention. It created a clearing for it. The long, sustained decay of a single string's vibration mimics the way a thought should ideally leave the mind, starting with clarity, and then slowly, elegantly thinning out until it becomes one with the silence. Listening to the monochord taught the ancient Greeks that beauty is not found in the complexity of noise, but in the purity of a single, well-tuned vibration that aligns the listener with the hidden, mathematical backbone of the cosmos. As that single golden note fades into the distance, your own thoughts can follow its lead. One by one they can resonate, hum softly, and then slowly thin out, becoming quieter and quieter until they merge with the velvety silence of the room. The breath settles into a singular, easy rhythm, a low and steady vibration that anchors you to the present moment, where nothing is required and everything is in perfect tune. The pursuit of this perfect mathematical tuning extended from the world of sound into the very world of numbers, where the Greeks discovered a ratio of such profound, natural elegance that they believed it was the signature of the divine. This is the golden ratio, or phi. They observed this proportion everywhere, in the way the seeds are arranged in a sunflower, in the spiral of a ram's horn, and in the graceful proportions of the human face. In their architecture and sculpture, they used this ratio to create a sense of dynamic symmetry. This is a balance that does not feel stiff or artificial, but living and breathing. A building like the Parthenon feels as though it is growing out of the rock because its heights and widths follow the same mathematical growth patterns as a living organism. To the Greeks, this was the ultimate secret to beauty, that for something to be truly aesthetic, it must be in harmony with the growth laws of nature. It suggests that our own lives have a natural underlying proportion, that there is a golden pace for our days, a balance between activity and rest that, when followed, makes our existence feel not like a struggle, but like a masterpiece of natural unfolding. This sense of unfolding was captured with breathtaking, frozen grace in the art of the Tanagra figurines. These were small terracotta statues, often no more than 6 or 9 inches tall, that depicted ordinary people in moments of absolute everyday repose. Unlike the grand, muscular statues of gods or heroes, A Tanagra lady might be shown sitting quietly on a wooden bench, wrapped in a heavy soft wool cloak, or standing still with a folding fan lost in a private distant thought. The artisans achieved a texture in the clay that looked like soft draped fabric, catching the light in a way that felt warm and intimate. These figurines were not kept in grand temples, but in the private corners of the home. They served as reminders of stillness. To look at a Tanagra figure was to see the beauty of the unobserved moment, the quiet, dignified peace of a person who is simply being rather than doing. It reveals a culture that found as much significance in the way a cloak falls over a resting shoulder as they did in the epic battles of the poets. It invites us to see the profound, sculptural beauty in our own stillness as we lie here, recognizing that the most elegant pose we can ever strike is one of total, unself-conscious rest. The earth that provided the clay for those figurines also provided the means for one of the most remarkable and perspective-shifting discoveries of the ancient world, the true size of our home. In the city of Serene, a scholar named Eratosthenes performed a feat of pure, quiet observation that seems almost like magic. He heard that in the city of Syene, on the summer solstice, the sun was so perfectly overhead that it cast no shadow in a deep well. Standing in Alexandria, at that exact same moment, Eratosthenes measured the shadow cast by a simple vertical pillar. With nothing more than the length of that shadow and a basic understanding of geometry, he sat in his quiet study and calculated the circumference of the entire Earth. He arrived at a number that was incredibly close to the actual figure we know today. Think of the staggering quiet power of that moment. A man sitting in a room surrounded by scrolls and the smell of ink was able to reach out with his mind and wrap it entirely around the curve of the planet. It is a reminder that the human spirit is not limited by our physical location. We can be perfectly still in our beds, yet our minds have the capacity to expand, to reach across continents and oceans, and to understand the vast, majestic scale of the world we inhabit. As you contemplate the vast, curving horizon of the Earth that Eratosthenes mapped in his mind, you might feel a sense of expansion in your own awareness. The room around you feels soft and spacious. The air is cool and easy to breathe. You are a part of a massive, beautiful and ancient sphere that is spinning slowly and silently through the dark. There is plenty of space for you to let go, to drift, and to expand into the quiet corners of the night. This expansive understanding of the physical world was matched by an equally deep and intricate understanding of the internal world of the body, particularly the way it reacts to the changing light of the day. The Greeks were among the first to recognize the healing power of heliotherapy, or sun healing. They designed their houses and public spaces to maximize exposure to the low, golden light of the winter sun, while providing deep, shaded retreats for the intense heat of the summer. They understood that light is not just something we see, but something the body drinks. In their Asclepians or healing temples, they utilized color therapy, believing that the soft, reflected light from specific stones, the cooling green of malachite or the warm, grounded red of jasper, could balance the internal humours of the body. This wasn't just superstition. It was a sensory-based approach to wellness. It recognizes that our environment, the colours, the shadows, and the quality of the light has a direct physical impact on our nervous system. As the light in your own room has faded and the shadows have grown long and soft, your body is receiving its own ancient signal to settle, to cool, and to enter a state of deep metabolic recovery, just as the patients in the ancient temples did thousands of years ago. The ultimate goal of all these rituals, the architecture, the geometry, the music and the light, was to achieve a state of autarky, or self-sufficiency. In the modern world, we often think of this as a political or economic term, but for the Greek philosophers, it was a deeply personal spiritual state. Autarky meant having everything you need for peace and happiness within yourself. It was the realization that while the world outside is unpredictable, ships may sink, weather may turn, and cities may change, the internal citadel of the mind can remain untouched. A person who practices autarky is like a calm harbour in a storm. They have cultivated an internal landscape so rich, so well ordered, and so peaceful that they can find contentment in the simplest things, the rhythm of their own breath, the warmth of a blanket, or the quiet progression of a thought. As you lie here now, you are practicing a form of autarky. For this time, you need nothing from the outside world. You have no messages to answer, no tasks to perform, and no one to please. You are a complete and self-contained world, possessing everything required for this moment of perfect, unshakable rest. This internal self-sufficiency was often symbolized by the image of the omphalos, the navel of the world. At the sanctuary of Delphi there stood a beehive-shaped stone carved with a delicate pattern of knotted ropes. The Greeks believed this spot was the absolute center of the world, the place where two eagles released by Zeus from opposite ends of the earth finally met. To stand at the omphalos was to be at the point of ultimate balance, the still center of the turning wheel. But the philosophers suggested that every person carries their own omphalos within them. It is that deep, quiet center of gravity located just behind the breath, a place that never moves, never worries, and never tires. By drawing your attention away from the extremities, away from the hands that work and the feet that walk, and focusing gently on this central point of stillness, you can find your way back to your own personal center. It is a place of infinite density and infinite peace, a small, quiet and sacred stone at the heart of your being that holds the entire world in a state of perfect suspended equilibrium, ready to guide you into the deepest reaches of sleep. Resting at that quiet, perfectly balanced center of your own awareness, you might naturally begin to notice the subtle, rhythmic flow of your own breath, moving like a slow underground spring. Deep beneath the sun-baked limestone of ancient Corinth, hidden away from the blinding glare of the afternoon, lies a masterpiece of natural and human engineering that embodies this constant hidden flow, the Fountain of Serene. Carved directly into the living bedrock over centuries, it is a series of 6 dark, vaulted chambers where the water is entirely protected from the heat of the sky. The massive stone walls are incredibly smooth, cool to the touch, and constantly weeping with pure, mineral-rich moisture. To stand at the edge of this subterranean pool is to be enveloped in an atmosphere of absolute enduring freshness. The sound of a single drop of water falling from the arched stone ceiling into the deep, dark basin below creates a perfect, echoing resonance that reverberates endlessly through the chambers. It is a space that provides a constant, generous flow of life, reminding us that even in the harshest, driest environments, there are deep, hidden reserves of cool, restorative energy, flowing quietly just beneath the surface, waiting to be drawn up into the light. Following that gentle, subterranean flow of water out of the dark caverns and down into the sunlit shallows of the Mediterranean Sea, we find an environment that nurtures a material of almost impossible, fairy tale delicacy. Clinging to the rocky seabed is a large, graceful mollusk known as the pinna nobilis, or the noble pen shell. To gently anchor itself against the pushing and pulling of the ocean tides, this creature spins a microscopic, incredibly strong anchor line. The ancient Greeks discovered that these tiny silken threads could be carefully, sustainably gathered from the ocean floor by breath-hold divers. This was byssus, the legendary and elusive sea silk. The process of transforming these marine threads into fabric was a labour of astonishing, breath-holding patience. Once washed in fresh water and treated with the acidic juice of lemons, the dull brown fibres would undergo a breathtaking chemical transformation. When laid out to dry under the warm Mediterranean sun, the sea silk would suddenly burst into a brilliant translucent gold. It was a textile so impossibly fine, so entirely devoid of weight, that a pair of gloves woven from byssus could easily be folded up and hidden inside the empty shell of a walnut. To imagine wearing a garment spun from the quiet depths of the sea, shining with the captured light of the sun, is to understand a culture that found the ultimate luxury in absolute weightless softness. This profound reverence for holding precious, delicate things required equally beautiful vessels, created through a process that demanded total, unhurried focus. Before the invention of the hollow glass-blowing pipe, Greek artisans crafted small, exquisite perfume bottles using a deeply tactile technique called core forming. They would carefully sculpt a temporary core of mud and clay at the end of a long metal rod, matching the exact internal shape of the desired bottle. Then they would slowly trail thin, glowing ribbons of molten, brightly coloured glass over the clay, wrapping it smoothly like warm taffy. To make the surface perfectly even, the artisan would roll the hot, glowing vessel across a flat, cool slab of polished stone known as a marva. But the most crucial, delicate part of the creation was the ending. If the glass cooled too quickly in the open air, the sudden drop in temperature would cause the internal tension to violently shatter the vessel. Instead, the bottle was placed into a special, warm kiln called an annealing oven, where the temperature was reduced over days, cooling the glass with agonizing, beautiful slowness. This microscopic, incredibly slow release of thermal stress ensured the glass would survive for centuries, safely holding thick, intoxicating oils infused with crushed iris, myrrh, and bitter almond. Like that slowly cooling glass resting in the dark, warm oven, your own body is undergoing a gentle release of tension right now. The internal heat and rush of the waking day are slowly dissipating into the cool night air. The muscles are unwinding, letting go of any rigid hold, settling safely and perfectly into their most permanent restful state. This profound understanding of the need for a protective, tempering buffer was scaled up to monumental proportions when the ancient architects sought to protect their most fragile, treasured possessions. When they constructed the grand libraries of the Hellenistic world, such as the magnificent Library of Celsus in the city of Ephesus, they faced a daunting environmental challenge. The thousands of papyrus scrolls that held the collective dreams and mathematics of the known world were incredibly vulnerable to the sweeping changes of coastal humidity and the scorching summer heat. To save them, the architects did not just build thicker walls, they built a building within a building. They designed a brilliant system of double walls, leaving a continuous empty corridor of air between the heavy exterior marble and the interior brick. This empty space acted as a perfect invisible blanket of thermal insulation. It allowed the massive building to literally breathe, preventing external dampness or searing heat from ever reaching the intricate wooden niches where the scrolls were carefully tucked away. The architecture itself was holding a quiet, protective layer of stillness, proving that sometimes the strongest defense against the chaotic elements of the outside world is simply a deliberate, well-maintained boundary of empty space. The protective stillness within those double walls contained the written knowledge of the world. But when the Greeks needed to share a specific thought across vast, insurmountable distances, they relied on a system of pure, breathtaking synchronicity. Imagine standing on a high, windswept mountain peak in the Peloponnese in the absolute dead of night. Miles away, on another distant dark peak, a small fire flickers into existence. This was the network of the Frudoi, the ancient optical telegraph system engineered by Aeneas Tacticus. The brilliant secret of this communication was not just the light, but the steady gravity of water. On both mountain peaks sat two identical tall clay cylinders filled with precisely the same amount of water, with identical cork floats resting gently on the surface. When the signalling fire was raised, both operators would simultaneously open the brass spigots at the bottom of their vessels. As the water drained at the exact same rhythmic rate, the cork floats would slowly, steadily sink past a series of identical messages written on a rod inside the cylinder. When the fire was hidden, they stopped the water. The receiving operator would simply look at the message their cork was resting beside, knowing the sender was looking at the exact same words miles away. It is a stunning, deeply comforting visualization of connection. Two distant points in the dark, completely separated by wild mountains and dense forests, yet moving downward in perfect liquid harmony. That same profound harmony, the delicate alignment of two separate things to create a singular, beautiful result, is the very foundation of how the ancient world created its most soothing melodies. According to the gentlest of their pastoral myths, the infant god Hermes wandered out of his mountain cave on the very first day of his life and discovered an empty tortoise shell resting in the sweet-smelling dew-covered grass. Recognizing the hidden architectural perfection of its natural dome, he stretched a piece of soft ox hide over the hollow opening, attaching 2 wooden arms and a crossbar. Across this, he pulled 7 strings of varying thickness, made from cured sheep gut. When he finally plucked the strings, the sound did not simply vanish thinly into the open air. The curved, hollow shell of the tortoise caught the vibration, swirling the sound waves around its smooth interior before releasing them as a rich, warm, and deeply resonant note. This was the invention of the lyre. It is a beautiful testament to the idea that the natural world is already perfectly designed to amplify beauty. The shell did not need to be violently altered or forced. Its empty, quiet space simply needed to be given a voice. You have your own quiet resonance chamber within. As you breathe in, the chest gently expands, creating a soft, hollow space of absolute calm. As you breathe out, the air carries away the last vibrating echoes of the day, leaving behind a smooth, deeply peaceful resonance that hums quietly and contentedly in the dark. When the eye moves from the curved acoustic dome of the wooden lyre to the grand, sweeping colonnades of a Greek temple, it encounters a masterful visual translation of that exact same musical harmony. The ancient architects did not place their massive marble columns arbitrarily, nor did they space them based solely on the brutal mathematics of load-bearing weight. They designed their structures according to a concept known as eurythmia, which beautifully translates to good rhythm or graceful proportion. Eurythmia is the deliberate proportional spacing of architectural elements that creates a sense of fluid, musical movement in solid stone. As you walk alongside a grand temple, the massive columns pass by your peripheral vision in a steady, predictable, and deeply soothing beat. The interplay of the bright sunlit marble and the dark, cool shadows between them acts exactly like the alternating notes and rests in a quiet, measured lullaby. It is architecture composed as a symphony, designed specifically to ease the mind of the observer, suggesting that the empty, shaded spaces between the heavy objects in our lives are just as vital and just as beautiful as the objects themselves. This comforting visual beat of light and shadow often led the citizens of Athens down winding paths to a place where the rhythm of the city was physical, audible, and deeply refreshing. In the soft, hazy blue light of the early morning, long before the heat of the sun could rise and bake the streets, people would gather at the Antikythera, the famous 9-spouter fountain house located near the bustling agora. Fed by a complex gravity-driven underground aqueduct that carried cold, pure water from the distant hills, the fountain was a masterpiece of civic care and sensory delight. The water poured continuously from 9 beautifully carved bronze lion heads into a wide, shallow stone basin. The sound of these 9 distinct heavy streams of water hitting the pool simultaneously created a vast, encompassing cushion of acoustic white noise. It was a sound that instantly, miraculously drowned out the clatter of horse hooves and the shouting of the marketplace just a few streets away. To stand before the Antikythera with a cool terracotta pitcher in your hands, listening to the endless rushing symphony of the water, was to participate in a daily ritual of purification and calm. The sheer, unstoppable abundance of the flow provided a deep psychological reassurance that the city was nourished, safe, and continuously cleansed of its burdens. The soothing, endless white noise of that falling water is the perfect auditory companion to one of the most revered and deeply sought-after mental states in ancient Greek philosophy. Beyond the pursuit of grand happiness, political power, or vast knowledge, the mystics and deep thinkers valued the profound cultivation of hesychia, Often translated simply as stillness or quiet, hesychia is actually a much more active, vibrant and luxurious condition. It is not just the flat absence of noise like a vacant room, but the deliberate peaceful centering of the soul. It is the feeling of sitting perfectly still in a sunlit courtyard, watching the dust motes drift slowly through the warm air and feeling absolutely no compulsion whatsoever to interrupt the moment with action or worry. To achieve hesychia was to consciously withdraw the tangled senses from the exhausting spinning wheel of the outside world and to rest deeply in your own internal quiet. The philosophers believed that this specific, rich stillness was the only true environment where profound wisdom could finally be heard, a quiet, shaded sanctuary where the mind finally stops reaching outward and gratefully, heavily, sinks inward. You are sinking into your own deep state of hesychia right now. The limbs are heavy, completely loose, and perfectly still. The mind has stopped its restless, searching reach into tomorrow. You're simply existing, resting perfectly in the quiet sanctuary of the present moment, surrounded entirely by a soft, protective blanket of unshakable peace. In that profound internal stillness, as the eyes close and the physical boundaries of the room melt away, the mind is free to drift upward once more, returning to the vast, comforting canvas of the night sky. Among the thousands of distant, burning suns, there is one specific, brilliant point of light that the Greeks look to for a sense of supreme, maternal comfort in the darkest hours. High in the northern hemisphere, shining with a distinct, gentle, golden yellow hue, is the star Capella. To the ancient stargazers, Capella was not just a massive celestial body burning in the void. It was the mythic, glowing representation of Amalthea, the gentle, nurturing goat who hid the infant god Zeus in a dark, quiet cave on the island of Crete. There she fed him her rich, sweet milk to keep him safe and strong, while the chaos of the Titanomachy raged in the world above. When the Greeks looked up at Capella's soft golden glow, they did not see a cold, indifferent, and terrifying universe. They saw the eternal, burning symbol of a quiet, protective guardian, a celestial reminder that even the most powerful forces in the universe required a time of total vulnerability, deep rest, and gentle nourishment in the dark. It is a star that watches over the sleeping world with infinite, unblinking patience. As Capella burns softly in the unimaginable distance, its light takes years to travel across the silent void, arriving just in time to rest gently against your closed eyelids, inviting you to sink even deeper into the welcoming velvet weight of the night. As the golden light of Capella rests gently against your closed eyelids, it slowly yields to the deepest, quietest hours of the ancient night, a time the Greeks believed was governed by a profound and silent grace. When the heat of the Mediterranean day finally evaporated into the vast dark, the atmosphere would undergo a beautiful physical transformation. The ancient Greeks did not see the night as an empty, barren space. They saw it as the domain of Selene, the Titan goddess of the moon. They imagined her driving a silver chariot across the sky, pulled by entirely white, winged horses that made absolutely no sound as they moved through the stars. Her passing was not just visual, it was deeply tactile. The Greeks believed that as Selene drifted overhead, the cool, humid air that trailed behind her chariot condensed onto the sleeping earth, creating Ursa, the morning dew. This was the physical manifestation of the night's cooling breath. To wake up and see 1,000 microscopic silver spheres of water perfectly balanced on the edge of a dry olive leaf was to witness the gentle, nourishing touch of the night. It is a deeply comforting realization that even while we sleep, completely unaware of the world, the atmosphere is quietly working to cool, hydrate, and replenish the earth, leaving behind a delicate blanket of pure water before the sun returns. That restorative silver dew would settle most beautifully in the high, inaccessible crevices of the mountains, finding its way to a plant that is an absolute masterpiece of natural botanical softness. High on the sheer, dizzying limestone cliffs of the Samaria Gorge on the island of Crete, a miraculous little herb known as Origanum dictamnus, or dittany of Crete, takes root in the bare rock. Because it grows in such an exposed, rugged environment, the plant developed a magnificent protective defense. Its small, rounded leaves are completely covered in a dense, woolly coating of microscopic white hairs. To touch a leaf of fresh dittany is to touch something that feels exactly like soft, heavy velvet. The ancient healers prized this plant above almost all others, utilising its fragrant, earthy oils to soothe wounds and calm the stomach. But the true beauty of dittany lies in its profound botanical contrast. It teaches a quiet, enduring lesson that the harshest, most jagged and unforgiving environments often produce the softest, most comforting and deeply healing remedies in the world. As you imagine the velvet softness of those small silver-green leaves, allow that same heavy, protective softness to drape over your own body. You're entirely insulated from the jagged edges of the waking world. The mattress rises up to support you, contouring to your shape, while your breath mimics the slow, invisible gathering of the dew, cool, steady, and perfectly natural. The sheer, jagged cliffs where that velvet herb grew were also the pathways for a slow, rhythmic migration that defined the pastoral life of the ancient world. Long before the heavy stone roads were paved, the rhythm of the year was marked by transhumance, the seasonal, unhurried movement of shepherds and their flocks from the dry, sun-baked lowlands up to the cool, green, high-altitude pastures of the mountains. This journey was not taken at a run, but at the steady, plodding pace of the flock. As thousands of sheep moved slowly up the winding limestone trails, they created an acoustic landscape of immense, ambient peace. The shepherds outfitted their animals with hand-hammered bronze bells called kudunia. Because every bell was forged by hand, no two sounded exactly alike. The result was not a synchronized, demanding melody, but a chaotic, deeply resonant and entirely soothing wall of low-frequency sound. The hollow metallic clank and tonk of the bronze echoing off the canyon walls created a rustic symphony of presence. For the shepherd resting with his eyes closed under the shade of a pine tree, that constant, wandering sound was the ultimate reassurance. It meant the flock was safe, the world was moving forward at a peaceful walk, and there was absolutely nothing that required sudden attention or alarm. To sleep under those echoing, high-altitude stars, the shepherds required a garment that was as much a portable sanctuary as it was a piece of clothing. They wore the kleina, a massive, incredibly thick cloak woven from the raw fleece of their own flocks. The creation of the kleina on a heavy, warp-weighted loom was an exercise in deliberate preservation. The weavers intentionally did not strip the natural lanolin oil from the wool. This meant the fabric was not only deeply water-resistant, capable of shedding the heavy mountain mist, but it also retained the rich, earthy, deeply grounding scent of the flock and the fields. Wearing a kleina was like wrapping yourself in the protective weight of the earth itself. The sheer mass of the woven wool provided a constant, heavy pressure against the shoulders and the back, acting as an ancient, wearable, weighted blanket. This deep touch pressure instinctively signals the human nervous system to stop scanning the horizon for danger, lowering the heart rate and inviting a profound, heavy, and immediate physical surrender to the cold mountain night. The heavy, majestic, and completely relaxed drape of those woolen cloaks was perfectly captured and immortalized in the most serene architecture of the ancient Athenian Acropolis. If you were to walk to the southern porch of the Erechtheion, you would not see standard, rigid columns holding up the heavy marble roof. Instead, you would see the caryatids. These are 6 larger-than-life marble maidens, carved with such exquisite, fluid detail that the stone appears to be breathing. They serve as the pillars of the temple, bearing thousands of pounds of solid marble on their heads. But the genius of their design lies entirely in their posture. They are not straining, their faces hold no tension, and their jaws are perfectly soft. They stand in a classic contrapposto pose, resting their entire weight firmly on one straight leg, while the other leg is slightly bent at the knee, completely relaxed beneath the folds of their carved dresses. It is an image of effortless weight-bearing. The caryatids offer a profound, silent philosophy for the resting mind. True strength and stability do not require you to be rigid, tense, or visibly struggling. You can bear the immense weight of the world while remaining entirely soft, poised, and deeply at rest. Take a moment to check the architecture of your own resting body. You do not need to brace yourself against the night. You can let the tension drain out of the back of the neck and allow the jaw to unclench. Let the soft surface beneath you bear the entire weight of your physical form, just as effortlessly as the caryatids hold the marble, allowing your mind to drift freely. The caryatids look out over the sprawling city, a place where the pursuit of perfect balance extended far beyond what the eye could see, reaching deep into the invisible, vibrating realm of sound. In the great semicircular stone theatres carved into the hillsides, ancient architects faced the daunting challenge of chaotic noise and muddy echoes. Their solution was brilliantly simple, completely hidden, and incredibly soothing. Embedded deep within the dark spaces beneath the sweeping tiers of limestone seating, they placed large, hollow bronze vessels called achaea. These jars were mathematically tuned to resonate at very specific frequencies. When a harsh, dissonant sound or a confusing echo bounced across the theatre, these empty jars would act as acoustic traps. They would literally swallow the unwanted noise, vibrating quietly in the dark to absorb the harsh static of the environment. Because the achaea absorbed the dissonance, the only sound that successfully floated up to the audience was the pure, clear, and perfectly articulated voice of the speaker. It is a beautiful physical metaphor for a well-ordered mind. The idea of having hidden, quiet spaces within yourself, designed specifically to absorb and neutralize the harsh, chaotic static of the day, leaving behind only clarity, focus, and quiet. This deep desire to filter out the noise and leave only the purest, most refined essence behind is visible in the most delicate, fragile pottery of the classical era, the white ground lekythos. Unlike the heavy, durable, glossy black and red vases used in loud, rowdy banquets, the lekythos was a slender, graceful vessel of quiet reverence. To create it, the potter would coat the terracotta with a slip of pure, powdery white kaolin clay. Upon this immaculate, eggshell-like surface, the artist would paint scenes using soft, matte washes of pale yellow, sky blue, and muted earth tones. These colours were entirely unfired, meaning they were incredibly delicate. A careless touch could rub the beautiful pigment right off the white clay. They were designed to hold small amounts of precious, highly scented olive oil, often used in quiet, solitary memorials. The lekythos was not built for permanence or heavy labour. It teaches a philosophy of gentle appreciation, reminding us that some of the most precious, beautiful things in life are inherently fragile, wonderfully fleeting, and require a profoundly soft and careful touch to be fully appreciated. Inside those fragile white ground vessels rested oils infused with the most painstakingly gathered scents of the Mediterranean, including the legendary slow-weeping tears of Chios. On this single, sun-drenched island in the Aegean, the Pistacia lentiscus tree produces a magical aromatic resin known as mastic. But the tree does not give up its treasure easily or quickly. The harvest of mastic is a masterpiece of slow, deliberate botanical patience. Cultivators carefully sweep the earth beneath the tree, covering it in white calcium carbonate powder. Then they make tiny, shallow, almost invisible incisions in the rough bark. They do not squeeze or force the tree, they simply step back and wait. Over the course of many long hot weeks, the tree slowly weeps clear, heavy, golden droplets of resin. These tears slowly stretch and eventually fall, landing softly on the white powder below, where they are baked by the sun into translucent, deeply fragrant crystals. When chewed or dissolved in warm oil, mastic releases a clean, piney, and profoundly soothing aroma that settles the stomach and clears the mind. It is living proof that true sweetness, healing, and clarity cannot be rushed, but must be allowed to arrive at its own quiet, unhurried, and perfectly natural pace. The slow, deliberate, sweeping motion of the farmer tending to the mastic trees perfectly mirrors the earliest, most deeply rhythmic way the ancient Greeks learned to navigate the written word. Before standardizing the rigid typewriter-like practice of reading strictly from left to right, they utilized a mesmerizing method of writing called boustrophodon. The word translates beautifully to "as the ox turns." When reading a stone tablet carved in this style, your eyes would trace the first line from left to right. But when you reached the end, you did not snap your eyes violently back across the page. Instead, the very next line simply reversed direction, reading smoothly from right to left, with the letters themselves elegantly mirrored. The third line would switch back again. Your eyes would sweep back and forth in a continuous, unbroken, undulating path, exactly like a farmer slowly and patiently ploughing a quiet field. It turns the act of reading into a deeply soothing, rocking motion for the mind. There are no sudden stops, no jarring resets, only a continuous, fluid holding of attention that weaves slowly down the surface of the stone. Like the steady, turning path of the ox in the field, your own breath is moving in its own continuous looping rhythm, in and out, left to right. The end of an exhale seamlessly curves into the beginning of an inhale. There are no sudden stops, just a gentle, endless turning of air that rocks the mind into a deeper state of rest. That continuous, smooth, unbroken turning found its ultimate physical expression in a quiet, shadowy laboratory in Hellenistic Alexandria, where the brilliant engineer Hero created a device of pure, mesmerizing wonder. It was the Eolipile, often recognized as the world's very first steam engine. But Hero did not build this engine to power massive, noisy machinery, or to grind heavy wheat. He built it as a philosophical toy, a piece of quiet, kinetic art designed to demonstrate the elegant, invisible forces of the natural world. Imagine a hollow, perfectly polished brass sphere, suspended effortlessly on two thin metal pipes above a cauldron of gently boiling pure water. As the heat rises, the invisible steam travels up the pipes and enters the golden globe, escaping only through two small bent nozzles on opposite sides. In the quiet of the room, surrounded by the soft, steady hiss of the steam and the warm, damp air, this golden sphere would begin to spin. It would rotate endlessly, smoothly, and perfectly in the empty air. It performed absolutely no labour. It simply existed in a state of continuous, friction-free equilibrium, a perfect sphere spinning peacefully in its own atmospheric warmth, demonstrating the quiet, circular majesty of physics. Watch that golden, steam-driven sphere spin slowly in your mind's eye. It is the perfect miniature reflection of the Earth itself, suspended entirely in the dark, spinning slowly and steadily, completely unbothered by the passing of the hours, carrying you gently deeper into the vast, turning night. As that golden, steam-driven sphere spins slowly in your mind's eye, it perfectly mirrors the quiet rotation of the Earth itself, suspended entirely in the dark. And as the Earth turned, the ancient Greek philosophers looked out into that dark and achieved a moment of breathtaking, quiet realization about the largest object in the night sky. For centuries, humanity believed the moon glowed with its own internal magical fire. But in the 5th century, a brilliant thinker named Anaxagoras stood under the night sky, observing the gentle curve of the shadow during an eclipse. He realized with profound clarity that the moon is entirely made of rock, and it produces absolutely no light of its own. It is simply a massive silent mirror, catching the brilliant light of the hidden sun and bouncing it softly back down to the sleeping Earth. To look up at the moon with this understanding is to witness the ultimate act of cosmic gentleness. It means that even when we are facing completely away from the sun, buried in the deepest hours of the night, the universe has provided a beautifully pitted silver reflector to ensure we are never left entirely in the dark. The desire to map that silver light and bring the staggering scale of the heavens down to a manageable human level led to the creation of an instrument of impossible, intricate beauty. This was the astrolabe. Invented by Hellenistic astronomers, it was a heavy, flat disc of polished brass, meticulously engraved with a complex overlapping web of perfect circles and sweeping lines. Resting on top was a delicate rotating lattice of metal called the rete, whose curved points mapped the exact positions of the brightest stars. By gently turning this brass web with the thumb, an ancient navigator or philosopher could perfectly simulate the slow rotation of the night sky over their specific location. It was a mechanical, handheld universe. There is something deeply grounding about the weight of cool brass in the palm, knowing that the vast, untouchable sweep of the cosmos has been translated into a few beautiful rotating geometric lines that you can quietly hold, study, and understand. Just as that heavy brass instrument fits perfectly into the palm of a hand, your own body fits perfectly into the space it rests upon. The mind does not need to spin out into the vastness of the world. It can simply rotate inward, smooth and deliberate, settling into a comfortable, quiet alignment. That same meticulous patience used to engrave the brass instruments of the astronomers was applied to the very ground the ancient Greeks walked upon. In the grand, sunlit courtyards of the Macedonian city of Pella, artisans created masterpieces not with expensive pigments or imported marble, but with the simplest, most common materials offered by the earth, river pebbles. Instead of violently cutting stones into rigid artificial squares, the mosaicists would spend weeks slowly walking the shallow banks of the local rivers, hand-selecting thousands of small, naturally smoothed pebbles in organic shades of chalk white, charcoal black, warm terracotta, and pale slate. Back in the courtyards, they would press these smooth, rounded stones into damp plaster, carefully matching their natural curves to create astonishingly detailed, sweeping images of mythological scenes and geometric borders. Because the stones were naturally tumbled by decades of flowing water, the finished floor possessed a uniquely soft, undulating texture. To walk barefoot across a pebble mosaic was to feel the cool, gentle history of the riverbed beneath your feet, a tactile reminder of the slow, rounding force of water over time. The satisfying organic curves of those river stones eventually inspired the architecture that rose above them, culminating in a structure that completely eliminated the harshness of the right angle. This was the tholos, the circular temple. While the grand rectangular temples like the Parthenon were built to project massive frontal authority, the tholos, such as the breathtaking marble sanctuary resting in the mountainous cradle of Delphi, was designed for an entirely different atmospheric experience. A circle has no beginning, no end, and no sharp, dark corners where shadows can gather and stagnate. When you stepped into the center of a tholos, surrounded by a perfect ring of beautifully carved, smooth columns, the air and the light moved around you in a continuous fluid embrace. The acoustic properties of the circular wall meant that any sound, even the softest sigh or the rustle of a linen cloak, was gently caught and perfectly distributed throughout the space. It is a masterpiece of architectural inclusion, creating an environment that wraps around the visitor, offering a profound, structural feeling of infinite, unbroken safety. Within the circular, echoing walls of those sacred spaces, particularly in the temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, the ancient Greeks employed a form of therapy that feels wonderfully familiar and deeply comforting today. Beyond the herbal poultices, the warm baths, and the quiet incubation sleep, these sanctuaries were home to a very special living remedy, the sacred temple dogs. The Greeks understood, long before modern psychological studies, that the simple, unhurried presence of a calm animal could dramatically lower the human heart rate and ease a frightened mind. These dogs, often with soft golden coats, were trained to wander freely and quietly through the open-air dormitories during the night. As patients lay resting in the dark, a temple dog might silently approach, lay its heavy, warm head on the edge of the cot, and offer a gentle, soothing presence. To wake in a strange place and feel the steady, rhythmic breathing of a sleeping dog resting against your hand is a universal language of comfort. It bypassed all complex medical theories, providing the simple, profound reassurance that you were not alone and that you were being quietly, faithfully watched over in the dark. You can imagine that same heavy, comforting warmth resting safely at the edge of your own awareness. A quiet guardian standing watch. The limbs grow even heavier, entirely safe to completely let go. There is nothing to guard against, nothing to brace for, just the deep, steady rhythm of your own heart slowing down. When the long, restorative night in the sanctuary finally drew to a close, the awakening was not forced by a jarring, sudden noise. The philosopher Plato, deeply invested in the peace of his students at the academy, is credited with inventing the world's very first and certainly the gentlest alarm clock. He recognized that waking a mind too abruptly shatters the delicate creative fragments of the dream state. His invention relied on the soft, steady physics of water. He designed a tall, sealed vessel connected to a secondary chamber by a thin lead pipe. As water dripped slowly and silently from the top vessel into the bottom throughout the night, it would eventually reach a critical point just as the sun began to rise. At this exact moment, the rising water would quickly displace the remaining air in the chamber, forcing it through a specially designed narrow brass whistle at the very top. The sound it produced was not a harsh clang, but a soft, warbling note that perfectly mimicked the call of a morning bird. It was an awakening designed to feel like a natural extension of the environment, a gentle, musical transition that allowed the mind to slowly, peacefully float up from the depths of sleep. Walking out into the cool morning air after that gentle awakening, a student of philosophy might find themselves wandering into a space entirely dedicated to the slow, quiet observation of the natural world. In Athens, a scholar named Theophrastus, the direct successor to Aristotle, established what is widely considered the world's very first systematic botanical garden. This was not a garden built for harvesting food or for simple aesthetic decoration. It was a living, breathing library of the earth. Theophrastus spent years quietly walking the shaded paths, carefully categorizing hundreds of different plants, from the towering, rough-barked oak trees to the smallest, most delicate, shade-loving ferns. He studied how roots searched for water in the dark, how leaves turned their faces slowly toward the moving sun, and how seeds lay dormant in the dry earth, waiting patiently for the rain. To walk through this ancient botanical garden was to practice the art of microscopic attention. It required a profound slowing of the mind to observe the silent, glacial pace of plant growth. It is a beautiful reminder that the natural world is constantly, quietly accomplishing monumental tasks of growth and renewal without ever making a single sound or rushing a single moment. Among the most prized and carefully tended plants in those ancient sunlit enclosures was the damask rose, a flower whose essence the Greeks learned to capture and preserve in a deeply soothing heavy oil. This was Rodinon, the most famous rose perfume of antiquity. The creation of Rodinon was a masterclass in slow botanical extraction. Unlike modern perfumes that use harsh, fast evaporating alcohols, the ancient perfumers used a method called enfleurage. They would harvest thousands of velvety rose petals in the absolute quiet of the early morning, just as the dew was evaporating but before the sun could burn away the fragile scent. These petals were then submerged in heavy clay vats filled with cold, pure olive oil or sweet almond oil. Over the course of many weeks, the vats were kept in cool, dark cellars. The heavy oil would slowly, patiently absorb the soul of the flower. The resulting liquid was incredibly rich, leaving a soft, lingering, powdery sweetness on the skin that could last for days. To anoint oneself with rodinon was to wear the concentrated, slow-gathered peace of 1,000 summer mornings, a tactile, sensory anchor that could instantly calm a racing mind. As you picture the heavy, sweet scent of crushed roses resting in the cool dark, allow your own chest to gently rise and fall. With every slow inhale, the lungs expand softly, like the overlapping petals of a flower opening in the dark. With every exhale, a wave of pure, heavy relaxation washes downward through the body. The invisible force that carried the sweet scent of those blooming roses across the courtyards and into the homes of the ancient world was a wind they intimately named and revered. While the harsh, freezing northern winds of winter were feared, the arrival of Zephyrus, the god of the west wind, was welcomed with a profound, collective exhale of relief. The zephyr was not a gale or a storm. It was a profoundly gentle, warming breeze that swept in from the Mediterranean Sea, carrying the faint, salty moisture of the ocean and the sweet promise of the incoming spring. It was the zephyr that was credited with melting the last stubborn patches of mountain snow and softly coaxing the dormant seeds to finally open their shells in the dark earth. To stand on a marble terrace and feel the zephyr brush against your face was to feel the atmosphere itself softening. It is the breath of the earth relaxing, a slow atmospheric sigh that washes away the rigid cold and invites the landscape to open, to breathe, and to gently return to life. The ancient shepherds and musicians found a way to literally capture that gentle, sweet-smelling breeze and turn it into the most organic, deeply melancholic and soothing music of the pastoral world. Sitting by the edge of a slow-moving river, surrounded by the rustling of the water, they would harvest the hollow reeds that grew in the damp clay. This was the birth of the syrinx, commonly known as the pan flute. A musician would cut a series of these hollow reeds into graduated, precisely measured lengths and bind them perfectly together with warm, fragrant beeswax. Because the instrument possessed no strings to tune and no complex mechanical keys to press, playing it was an act of pure, breath-driven intuition. The musician would simply blow softly across the open, hollow tops of the reeds, catching the air against the sharp internal edges. The resulting sound is fundamentally different from any modern instrument. It is incredibly breathy, hollow, and hauntingly woody. It is the exact acoustic replica of the wind whistling softly through a grove of bamboo, a low, murmuring ambient melody that sounds like the natural world singing softly to itself. As the hollow, breathy notes of the syrinx drift downstream, mingling with the quiet sound of the flowing water, they invite the mind to let go of the rigid riverbanks and simply float, carried safely onward by the slow, inevitable current. As that golden, steam-driven sphere spins slowly in your mind's eye, its perfect, frictionless rotation mirrors the quiet turning of the earth itself, suspended entirely in the dark. As the night carries you forward, the journey of the mind becomes as smooth and effortless as the passage of a ship learning to cross the solid earth. On the narrow, rocky isthmus of Corinth, where the roaring, turbulent waters of the Peloponnese met the mainland, ancient engineers constructed a masterpiece of safe passage known as the Diolkos. This was a magnificent paved trackway made of hard, sun-bleached limestone stretching for miles across the land. Deep, perfectly parallel grooves were carved into the stone, acting as secure guiding rails. Instead of facing the treacherous, storm-tossed voyage around the southern capes, sailors would gently hoist their heavy wooden ships out of the water and place them onto wheeled wooden sledges. Drawn by slow, plodding oxen, the massive ships would glide smoothly and safely across the dry land, moving quietly through fragrant pine forests and silver-leaved olive groves until they were gently lowered back into the calm waters on the other side. It is a stunning realization that even the heaviest, most burdensome vessels of our lives can sometimes be lifted entirely out of the turbulence, guided along a prepared, secure path, and carried safely to quiet waters. The profound physical relief experienced by those sailors, resting safely on dry land after days on the restless sea, was elevated by the philosophers into one of the most deeply comforting ideals of the ancient world. They called this state aponia. In our modern lives, we often define pleasure as the active pursuit of thrilling, intense sensations, or the accumulation of new experiences. But the Epicurean thinkers believed that the absolute highest peak of physical pleasure was simply the complete, undisturbed absence of pain. Aponia is the luxurious, quiet sensation of a body at total rest. It is the feeling of untying a tight leather sandal at the end of a long, dusty walk, or the way a tense muscle finally unclenches and melts into the warmth of a bed. It requires absolutely no effort to achieve. It is a state of letting go rather than gathering. To practice aponia is to realize that the body naturally wants to return to a state of soft, painless equilibrium, and that the greatest physical joy we can ever experience is simply the profound, quiet comfort of not hurting at all. As you rest here, you can invite that exact, gentle equilibrium into your own limbs. The muscles of the jaw and the shoulders can completely surrender their grip. The body grows delightfully heavier, the breath settles into a deep rhythmic tide, and the mind can simply drift, resting safely in the soft, painless quiet of the present moment. That physical ritual of finding a clean, painless equilibrium was practiced daily in the sprawling, sun-warmed courtyards of the gymnasium. After hours of exertion, athletes did not wash with harsh soaps or abrasive scrubbing that would strip the skin. Instead, they engaged in a slow, deeply satisfying process of cleansing using a perfectly curved metal tool called a strigil. First, they would pour rich golden olive oil over their tired bodies, allowing the thick liquid to mix with the fine dust and the salt of their own effort. Then, using the smooth, blunt edge of the bronze strigil, they would slowly and methodically scrape the heavy oil away in long, sweeping downward motions. The feeling of the cool metal gliding across the heated skin, pulling away all the exhaustion and grime of the day, was intensely soothing. It left the body feeling incredibly soft, supple, and entirely renewed. This daily ritual was a tactile, meditative act of physically stripping away the heavy, accumulated layers of the outside world, revealing the clean, quiet, and perfectly rested self underneath. This profound desire to reveal a smooth, glowing, and flawless surface was the driving force behind the most awe-inspiring and deeply revered works of art in the ancient temples. These were the chryselephantine statues. Created by master sculptors like Phidias, these colossal figures of the gods were not carved from cold, white marble or cast in dark, heavy bronze. They were built over massive wooden armatures and completely covered in plates of pure, gleaming gold and smooth, creamy ivory. In the shadowed, windowless interior of a temple's inner sanctum, illuminated only by the flickering warm light of hundreds of small oil lamps, the ivory possessed a magical, almost breathing quality. It did not look like stiff stone or hard bone. It absorbed the ambient warmth of the flames and looked exactly like luminous living skin. To stand before the towering statue of Athena in the Parthenon and see her ivory face glowing softly in the dark was to feel the physical, comforting presence of the divine. It is a masterpiece of bringing warmth into the dark, proving that even the most massive, imposing structures can possess a heart of soft, radiant, and gentle light. The delicate orchestration of light to create a sense of profound, quiet wonder was elevated to an architectural science high in the remote Arcadian mountains of the Peloponnese. Here stands the Temple of Apollo at Bacsae, an enigmatic structure built out of cool grey limestone, miles away from the noise of any major city. Unlike almost every other Greek temple, which faced the rising sun in the east to catch the dawn, Bacsae faces uniquely north-south. But the architect, Iktinos, designed a brilliant hidden secret into the heavy stone walls. On the eastern side of the inner sanctum, he placed a single, perfectly positioned doorway. For most of the year, the interior of the temple remains in cool, quiet, and unbroken shadow. But on a very specific few days during the summer, the rays of the rising sun strike perfectly through that single eastern door, sending a blinding golden shaft of light cutting through the dark to illuminate a single, sacred column at the very centre of the room. It is a slow-motion, astronomical performance in solid stone. It teaches us that illumination does not need to be constant to be beautiful. Sometimes, the most profound moments of clarity arrive briefly, perfectly timed, and exactly when we need them, before returning us to the peaceful dark. When that single, golden shaft of light finally faded, and the remote mountain temple sank back into the cool shadows of the night, the ancient observers would look up to find the sky filled with a different, softer kind of navigation. Gliding gracefully along the glowing, dusty path of the Milky Way is a constellation the Greeks called Ornis, the bird, which we know today as Cygnus, the swan. Its brightest stars form a massive, perfect cross, but the ancient mind saw the long, elegant neck and the wide, outstretched wings of a magnificent swan flying southward in absolute silence. In their gentle myths, the swan was the sacred bird of Apollo, associated with the soothing, healing power of music and prophecy. They believed that swans sang only once, producing a hauntingly beautiful and incredibly peaceful melody right before they surrendered to the end of their lives. To watch the constellation of the swan flying endlessly, slowly, and silently through the cosmic river of stars is to feel a sense of majestic, unhurried grace. It is a celestial reminder that we too can navigate the vast dark with quiet elegance, moving forward without a single sound. And you too are navigating this night with that exact same quiet grace. There is nothing pulling at you, no heavy currents to fight. You can simply stretch out your own awareness, entirely unburdened, and let the slow rotation of the earth carry you safely forward into the deepest, softest hours of rest. That silent glide of the swan through the vacuum of space contrasts beautifully with the ancient fascination for how sound travels, twists, and echoes through the hollow, protective spaces of the earth. On the island of Sicily, in the great city of Syracuse, there is a massive, winding limestone cave that was carved with such acoustic perfection that it became known as the Ear of Dionysus. The entrance to the cave is shaped remarkably like a colossal teardrop, and its smooth, curving walls narrow exactly like the internal canal of a human ear. The acoustics inside this subterranean chamber are so incredibly sensitive that a person standing in the deepest, darkest corner of the cave could strike a match or whisper a single quiet word, and the sound would be amplified and carried with crystal clarity all the way to the entrance, hundreds of feet away. It is an environment of absolute hyper-receptive listening. It suggests that the Earth itself has hidden spaces specifically designed to hear our quietest, most fragile thoughts, effortlessly amplifying the soft whispers that we're simply too tired to shout. While those massive limestone caves captured the invisible, echoing vibrations of the human voice, the sunlit orchards of the Mediterranean captured the sweetest, most hidden treasures of the soil, wrapped in a masterpiece of botanical packaging. The ancient Greeks revered the roa, the pomegranate tree, as a symbol of profound abundance and the deep cyclical nature of life and rest. To look at a pomegranate from the outside is to see a tough, leathery and almost uninviting sphere, baked by the late summer sun into a dusty mottled red. But the true magic of the fruit is entirely internal. When gently cracked open, the thick rind reveals a stunning hidden architecture. Hundreds of tiny, brilliant, ruby-red seeds, each one individually wrapped in a perfectly translucent, sweet tart pocket of juice, all nested together in soft, white protective membranes. It is a quiet explosion of life hidden within a modest, unassuming shell. The myth of Persephone, who ate these seeds in the underworld, tied the pomegranate forever to the concept of the winter slumber. the idea that the earth must retreat, close its tough outer shell, and rest in the dark in order to protect the brilliant sweet seeds of the coming spring. The deep, quiet rest of that winter earth was perfectly mirrored by the slow, peaceful inhabitants of the hidden, sun-warmed coves along the jagged Greek coastline. While ambitious sailors navigated the deep, unpredictable waters of the open sea, the secluded pebble beaches and shallow limestone sea caves were the sacred domain of the Monachus monachus, the Mediterranean monk seal. The Greeks considered these deeply gentle, large-eyed creatures to be sacred to both Poseidon, the god of the sea, and Apollo, the god of the sun. They loved to stand on the cliffs and watch the seals haul their heavy, silver-grey bodies out of the cool surf to bask motionless for hours on the hot, smooth rocks. The sight of a monk seal sleeping deeply in the afternoon sun, occasionally shifting its heavy weight or letting out a soft, contented sigh, was the ultimate picture of coastal peace. The ancient writers noted that the seals seemed to exist in a state of permanent, blissful lethargy, entirely unafraid of the changing tides. They are a wonderful living example of the importance of simply stopping, finding a warm, quiet spot out of the wind, and allowing the heavy body to rest completely. The slow, contented sigh of a resting seal matches the soft, measured rhythm by which the Greeks chose to measure their most quiet, personal, and contemplative hours. We touched earlier upon the monumental water clocks that governed the city squares, but the Greeks also utilised a much smaller, deeply intimate version called the clepsydra, which translates beautifully to water thief. This was a simple, elegant terracotta bowl with a tiny, precise hole at the very bottom. It was often used in quiet study during the recitation of poetry, or through the long, dark hours of the night to measure a specific, short duration of time. You would fill the earthen bowl with cool water, and as the liquid escaped drop by drop, producing a gentle, rhythmic, and incredibly soothing dripping sound, you would simply read or meditate until the bowl was empty. There were no metallic hands ticking violently forward, no harsh alarms to shatter the peace of the room. Time was experienced not as a rigid, demanding master, but as a soft, finite resource that gently flowed away, returning to the earth. To measure your evening by the slow, quiet emptying of a water bowl is to understand that time is not running out. It is simply flowing, smoothly and naturally, carrying the waking day away and leaving behind a profound, empty stillness. As that profound, empty stillness settles over the room, the senses can slowly shift away from the cool, evaporating moisture of the water clock and move toward a deeply comforting, aromatic warmth. While we often envision the ancient Greek world as a landscape of stark, blinding white marble, the reality was vibrantly, joyfully colourful, brought to life through a breathtaking technique known as encaustic painting. Instead of mixing their ground pigments with water or harsh, fast-drying oils, ancient artisans used a base of pure, heavily refined beeswax. In the quiet, shaded workshops, a bronze brazier would be kept at a low, steady heat, melting the wax until it was the consistency of heavy cream. The artist would mix in vibrant natural powders, rich malachite green, deep cinnabar red, and bright ochre, and then apply this hot coloured wax directly to the wooden hulls of ships or the smooth surfaces of marble statues. The atmosphere of these workshops must have been incredibly soothing, permanently perfumed with the rich, sweet scent of warm honey and melting wax. When the encaustic cooled and hardened, it formed an absolutely waterproof, luminous shell. To look at a sculpture painted this way was not to see flat, dry colour, but a vibrant, glowing surface that held the ambient warmth of the hive, preserving the beauty of the stone in a perfect golden suspension. The desire to create perfectly sealed, harmonious systems extended far beyond the art studios and into the very machinery of their daily lives, particularly in the way they sought to eliminate the stress of human ambition. In the bustling heart of democratic Athens, where the potential for loud, chaotic disputes was high, the Greeks invented an ingenious, heavy stone device designed to completely surrender human control over to the quiet fairness of gravity. This was the Cleroterion, the ancient allotment machine. It consisted of a massive upright slab of limestone carved with hundreds of tiny horizontal slots. Citizens would insert small bronze tickets bearing their names into these slots. Beside the slab was a hollow vertical tube. The operator would drop a handful of tiny mixed bronze and white dice down into the dark tube. As the dice fell, clicking and tumbling softly against the stone, they would emerge one by one at the bottom, their colours perfectly and randomly selecting which rows of citizens would serve on a jury that day. There is a profound architectural relief in this mechanism. It meant that nobody had to argue, nobody had to fight for a position, and the heavy burden of making a choice was completely lifted. The citizens simply watched the dice fall and trusted the completely impartial, unhurried, and quiet rhythm of chance to guide their day. That beautiful concept of surrendering the need to make a choice is physically mirrored in the ancient, meditative pathways they designed for the human feet. When we hear the word labyrinth, we often think of a terrifying, complex maze filled with dead ends and confusing intersections. But the true, original walking labyrinths of antiquity were entirely different. A classical labyrinth consists of only a single, unbroken, continuous path that slowly winds and folds back on itself, gently guiding the walker from the outside edge all the way to the very centre. There are absolutely no tricks, no branching paths, and no possibility of getting lost. To walk a classical labyrinth is to engage in a profound physical meditation. You do not need to look ahead, you do not need to memorise a route, and you do not need to worry about making a wrong turn. You simply lower your eyes, let your shoulders drop, and place one foot in front of the other. The mind is completely freed from the exhausting labour of navigation, allowing the steady, rhythmic pacing of your own body to lull you into a state of deep, untroubled focus. You can step onto that same single, continuous path in your own mind right now. There are no decisions left to be made today. There are no dead ends to navigate and no choices to weigh. You're on a smooth, predictable path that leads only inward, guiding you safely and gently toward the quietest centre of your own rest. The quiet, rhythmic pacing of feet upon the earth eventually inspired one of the most elegant, unassuming mathematical inventions of the ancient world. To measure the vast distances of the winding roads connecting their city-states, the Greeks did not rely on exhausting guesswork. They relied on the hodosmetron, the very first odometer. Built by brilliant engineers like Hero of Alexandria, this device was often mounted inside a standard horse-drawn cart. It utilised a complex, beautiful series of interlocking carved wooden gears connected directly to the wheel axle. But the true genius lay in how it communicated. Above the gears sat a small brass box filled with perfectly round heavy metal balls. For exactly every Roman mile the cart travelled, the gears would complete a full cycle, gently pushing a single brass ball through a hole to drop into a metal receiving pan below. Clink. The sound was crisp, sudden, and incredibly satisfying. The driver did not need to count or calculate. They simply sat back, listened to the rhythmic rolling sound of the wooden wheels, and waited for that occasional reassuring chime. It transformed the exhausting, endless expanse of a long journey into a manageable musical sequence, proving that even the longest distances can be conquered effortlessly, one quiet, measured note at a time. When those long, dusty journeys finally ended, and the traveller retreated to the cool, shaded dining rooms for the evening meal, the vessels they drank from offered their own slow, deliberate journeys of the mind. One of the most famous pieces of ancient pottery is a wide, shallow drinking cup known as a kylix, painted by the master artisan Ezekias. From the outside, the cup is beautiful but unassuming. The true masterpiece is hidden entirely on the inside, completely obscured when the cup is full of dark, heavy wine. But as the drinker slowly sips, and the dark liquid gently drains away, a breathtaking scene is gradually revealed at the bottom of the bowl. It depicts the god Dionysus reclining peacefully on a curved wooden ship. The mast of the ship has transformed into a massive flourishing grapevine, heavy with fruit, and 7 dolphins swim joyfully in the space around the boat. Because the inside of the cup is curved, the wine would gently lap against the painted ship, making it look as though Dionysus was truly floating on a miniature wine-dark sea. It is a brilliant interactive piece of art that rewards patience. It teaches us that clarity and profound, beautiful visions are often waiting for us at the very bottom of our experiences, slowly revealing themselves only after we have quietly processed and drained away the heavy substance of the day. While the men sought clarity at the bottom of a painted cup, the women of ancient Greece created their own fleeting, magical landscapes, high above the noise of the city streets. During the deepest, most sweltering heat of the midsummer, the festival of the Adonia was celebrated exclusively by women. In the cool dark of the evening, they would carry broken terracotta roof tiles and shallow clay shards up the narrow stairs to the flat rooftops of their homes. These shards were filled with loose, dark earth and planted with fast-growing seeds of wheat, fennel, and crisp lettuce. For a few short, beautiful nights, the rooftops of the city were transformed into elevated, private, hanging gardens. The women would gather under the vast, glittering canopy of the night sky, watering the seeds and watching the tender green shoots spring rapidly from the soil in the summer warmth. These gardens of Adonis were never meant to be permanent. They sprouted quickly and faded just as fast under the morning sun. But their brief, bright existence was a celebration of the ephemeral. It is a lovely reminder that not everything we cultivate needs to last forever to be meaningful. Sometimes, creating a tiny, lush sanctuary in the dark, meant to be enjoyed for only a single night, is the most profound act of care we can offer ourselves. Like those delicate green shoots resting on the high rooftops, your mind can float effortlessly above the heavy stone architecture of the waking world. The air is cooler up here, the atmosphere is perfectly still, and you are entirely unburdened by the weight of permanence. You are allowed to just be, resting lightly under the stars. The profound connection between the physical movement of the body and the opening of the mind was formalized in one of the most famous educational environments of antiquity. Just outside the walls of Athens lay a quiet, incredibly lush grove of trees known as the Lyceum. It was here that Aristotle established his school, but he did not believe in forcing his students to sit rigidly at heavy wooden desks in dark rooms. Instead, he founded the peripatetic school, a word that literally translates to of walking. Aristotle would deliver his most complex universe-shifting lectures while strolling slowly and rhythmically along the shaded, colonnaded walkways, called stoas, with his students following closely beside him. He understood a fundamental truth of human physiology. The gentle, repetitive, bilateral motion of walking naturally soothes the nervous system. The steady rhythm of the feet striking the earth acts like a metronome for the heart, which in turn regulates the breath, providing the brain with a smooth, continuous flow of oxygen. By tying the act of deep thinking to the unhurried physical cadence of a stroll, the peripatetics ensured that their philosophy was never stagnant or anxious, but always moving forward with the calm, measured grace of a body in perfect motion. That slow, rhythmic forward momentum of the ancient world was mostly carried by the great wooden merchant ships traversing the Mediterranean, but the true peace of those vessels was often found not on the surface, but in what they occasionally left behind in the deep. Over the centuries, hundreds of wooden ships carrying thousands of heavy terracotta amphorae succumbed to the sudden winter storms, sinking quietly to the bottom of the sea. But in the grand, sweeping timeline of the ocean, a shipwreck is not a scar, it is an invitation. When a ship settled onto the barren, sandy seafloor, the wood would eventually dissolve, leaving behind massive, beautiful mountains of perfectly stacked clay jars. In the absolute silence of the blue depths, nature immediately began to reclaim them. The smooth curves of the amphorae became perfect, protective caves for shy octopuses, brightly coloured sponges and delicate blooming corals anchored themselves to the terracotta handles, transforming the disaster of the surface world into a thriving, eternal, and incredibly peaceful artificial reef. It is a breathtaking example of transformation. The heavy burdens that simply could not be carried anymore are allowed to sink, where they are gently repurposed by the dark water, becoming sanctuaries of quiet life that will remain undisturbed for thousands of years. The idea of finding profound comfort in unexpected, quiet creatures was deeply integrated into the ancient medical practices performed in the temples of Asclepius. We have walked through the abaton and the sacred sleeping quarters and met the gentle temple dogs, but there was another far more mysterious presence that glided through the dark. These were the Aesculapian snakes. They were a specific breed of large, incredibly sleek, non-venomous rat snakes, possessing scales of a beautiful polished golden brown. In the ancient world, snakes were not inherently feared. They were deeply revered as symbols of renewal and the healing energy of the earth itself, because of their ability to peacefully shed their old damaged skins. As the patients slept on their low cots, hoping for a healing dream, these tame, sacred snakes were allowed to slither freely across the cool marble floors. Occasionally, a snake might slide smoothly and weightlessly across the arm or the chest of a sleeping person, to wake slightly in the dark and feel the cool, dry, incredibly smooth scales of the temple. Snake brushing against your skin was not a moment of terror, but a moment of absolute breathtaking awe. It was believed to be the literal physical touch of the god of medicine, a soft, silent blessing sliding through the night to absorb your illness and leave you entirely renewed. Allow that same cool, smooth and gentle energy to glide over your own tired muscles. If there is any lingering fear or tension hiding in the corners of your mind, you can simply exhale and let it shed away, leaving behind a fresh, unburdened, and entirely peaceful layer of calm. You're completely safe, watched over by the quietest guardians of the dark. Those ancient seekers believed that the entire vast world they inhabited, with its towering mountains, deep healing temples, and sprawling cities, was ultimately held safely together by a single, massive, and entirely comforting boundary. Before the Greeks fully mapped the globe, they believed the Earth was a flat, beautifully textured disk, and wrapping entirely around the outer edge of this disk was Oceanus. Oceanus was not merely a sea, he was the greatest river in the universe. The Greeks envisioned an incredibly deep, impossibly wide and continuously flowing band of fresh water that moved in a perfect eternal circle around all the lands of the earth. This grand river had no source and no mouth. It simply flowed into itself in a slow, majestic and unending loop. It was the father of all the clouds, the source of every gentle rain shower, and the origin of every winding river that nourished the interior lands. To imagine the concept of Oceanus is to imagine the ultimate cosmic embrace. It means that no matter how far you travel, no matter how wild or unpredictable the interior of the world becomes, you are always completely surrounded by a soft, flowing, and infinite boundary of water. It is a universe that holds itself together with the gentle, unshakable gravity of a slow-moving stream, eternally circulating, eternally renewing, and eternally at rest. As we drift along the outermost edge of that great world-encircling river, we encounter the final and most profound secret of the ancient Greek world, a secret that was never carved into stone or written on a scroll, but was felt in the marrow of every living thing. This is the concept of cosmos. To us, the word often suggests the cold, dark vacuum of outer space, but to the Greeks, it meant something far more intimate and beautiful. The word cosmos originally meant good order, arrangement, or ornament. It was the belief that the entire universe was not a collection of random clashing forces, but a perfectly arranged, beautifully decorated, and harmoniously balanced whole. They believed that the same mathematical ratios that made a lyre string sound beautiful were the exact same ratios that governed the growth of a leaf, the movement of the tides, and the slow, majestic rotation of the stars. In this worldview, nothing is accidental. Every stone, every breeze, every falling drop of rain, and every quiet breath you take is an essential, perfectly placed ornament in a grand, universal design of peace. To understand the cosmos is to realize that you are not a small, isolated creature struggling against a vast and indifferent world. Instead, you are a vital, beautiful, and perfectly integrated part of a singular, breathing masterpiece. You belong here, in this exact moment, held safely within a structure of infinite balance and enduring grace. It is the ultimate expansive comfort, the realization that the universe itself is at rest, and because you are the universe observing itself, you are allowed to be at rest too. The long journey through these 101 wonders has now reached its quietest, most peaceful destination. Like a ship that has crossed the wide oceanus and finally entered the still silver waters of a protected harbour, your mind has completed its travels. There is nothing more to see, nothing more to learn, and no further distance to cover. All the images we have gathered, the glowing marble, the velvet herbs, the scent of crushed roses, and the deep resonant hum of the bronze instruments, are now dissolving into a soft, formless mist of calm. You do not need to hold on to any of these facts. You do not need to remember the names, the dates, or the places. They have done their work. They have served as gentle stepping stones, leading you further and further away from the noise of the day and deeper into the sanctuary of the night. Allow the weight of your body to become absolute. Feel the profound, unshakable gravity of the earth pulling you down into a state of total, heavy surrender. Every muscle in your face is smooth. Your hands are open and still. Your feet are heavy and warm. The air in the room is cool, and your breath has become a slow, rhythmic tide that moves entirely on its own, a gentle rise and fall that requires no thought and no effort. You're perfectly supported. You're entirely safe. The history of the world is resting. The stars are turning in their ancient silent paths, and the great world-encircling river is flowing in its eternal quiet loop. There is only this moment. There is only this stillness. There is only this peace. The journey is over, and the rest has begun. You're fading now, drifting into the soft velvet darkness, where all stories end and all dreams begin. And now, 101 wonders are resting with you. Sleep now. Good night.